need to shrink my skull.
I hit the live button.
Oh, are we live? Okay, should stop me from that.
I did. I hit the live button. We're live. Stop inspecting your nose hair in the camera. That's no longer
no bears in the
time. Yep, time to go. This is the live broadcast of the This Week in Science podcast, and we are recording right now to do this podcast thing that we do every week. Some of it will probably end up in the podcast. Some of it may not. But we are all here regardless. And we hope that you are ready to enjoy the show. Because, are you ready to go, team?
Oh, I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
Ready as we'll ever be. This is the best answer that we can have, right? Ready
Sometimes.
as we'll ever be. Sometimes. Some way, somehow. Starting in a 3, 2. This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 818, recorded on Wednesday, March 31st, 2021. What to do about the beasts? What should we do? I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight on the show, we will fill your head with synthetics, rabbits, and a conservative interview. But first...
Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. The whole here today, gone tomorrow outlook on life can make us seize the day with the gusto of a first-year declared poetry major, evoking ancient themes of love and loss, action and change, as if all of our moments were monumental, born of some epic story never to be forgotten, meaningful, intentional, and beautiful to behold. Or we can go the other route, which is the terrible waiting between the poetic beats as we endure simply to survive. It can make us fritter and waste the hours in an offhand way. The apathy of impermanence, the fleeting worry, the fleeting joys, the fleeting terror of fleeting moments. But these aspects of life that make us aware of our brevity ignore the larger story for pages that mention us by name. This idle skimming, disjointed reading ignores the long shadows a life can cast. We are all part of a much greater story, one that has evolved over billions of years, one that was once independent, that is now dependent on our monumental choices. A modern-day world of love and loss, action and change. It is a story that can be meaningful, intentional, and beautiful to behold if only you take the time to read it. Whatever you want to do, the moment in which you can do it is always now, and where better to be now than here with us on This Week in Science. Coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening.
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
And a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We are back again, dancing our little science booties off to the scientific beat. What a wonderful intro tonight. That disclaimer was pretty special there, Justin.
Oh.
Nice.
Wait. You mean the other ones then that I've been doing weren't
Yeah,
weren't
those
good
other
enough
ones.
for you?
Garbage.
I finally got one that you were like, okay, that one was good.
That one was
The
good.
other ones didn't
good
quite
one.
hit the mark, but that one was good.
Yep.
Thank you, Kiki.
You're welcome. Congratulations. You hit my bar. Thanks for joining us tonight, everyone. On the show, I have stories about some synthetic life making great divides. Some very good stuff. And I'm theming up my stories in a conservation biodiversity bent in honor of our interview tonight. We'll be speaking with Michelle Nijhuis, who has written a book that we're going to be talking about in just a bit. But Justin, what did you bring?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me
Okay.
take a look.
Always
here it
a
is.
question.
I have jawless fish. Stuff that we can learn from jawless fish. I have a South American mystery. a socially distanced mice and hitting antimatter with lasers.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Pew, pew, pew. Because that's what sounds lasers make. We all know that. Blair, what's in the animal corner?
Oh, I have some theming today, too, that I didn't even realize. It's all kind of about evolution. So I have the origin of hopping, the origin of dreams, and the origin of venom.
I like it. It's all origin stories. You're like, it's like science superhero hour. Maybe we should change the name of your section. Yeah.
Yeah. Or an Aesop of sorts.
Aesop of sorts. There we go. Yes. Yeah. All right, everyone. Before we dive into all of the science stories, I do want to remind you that if you have not yet subscribed to This Week in Science, you can find us on YouTube, on Facebook. We are on Twitch as @TWIS Science. And if you go to podcast directories, we are a podcast, and you can subscribe to us on just about every podcast directory that's out there. Just look for This Week in Science. Our website is twis.org if you want to check out show notes and other details about the show. Let's dive into this science. First story of the night, I want to chat a little bit about synthetic biology. We've heard a lot for years. Craig Venter years back was like, I'm going to make synthetic life. You know, he didn't say it exactly like that, but he started a huge push to start creating synthetic organisms. And in that process, in 2016, researchers created a synthetic organism with a very minimal set of genes. It was like 470 some odd genes, a very small number of genes. And they really just want to figure out what is the minimal number of genes, what are the most basic genes that are needed to support cellular life. And so they started out with a regular bacterium, sucked out its DNA, put in some DNA that they had synthetically created. And there in 2016, their synthetic life, it was looking pretty good. It was doing life things. It was trying to divide. But when it tried to divide, it didn't do it very well. It created these little lopsided bits that wasn't evenly dividing the way that cells are supposed to divide. And so they're like, okay, we still need to work on this. Obviously, we don't have the replication part of biology down yet. And so they added a number of genes. And now they have succeeded in creating an organism that is able to self-replicate, divide evenly into evenly sized spherical cells. And all it took were 492 genes.
That's a pretty decent size.
It's a pretty decent size, but that is really small when it comes down to the number of genes that most organisms have. Most biological life has many, many more genes than just 400 or so. Yeah, so we're dealing with this group. This research was led by researchers in the cellular engineering group at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And the hope is that they'll be able to one day be able to produce these synthetic cells to be biological sensors. And that by creating cells that can go about normal biological functions, metabolism, replication, just normal activity of cells, but then be given a special function through genes that have been added by researchers. Perhaps they can be used to detect environmental toxins. Perhaps they could be used to monitor temperature, light emissions from different places, and could really be used instead of engineered systems. It's cellular engineered systems. This organism is now called JCVI Syn 3A. It has a very fancy name, but it's able to have normal cell division, which is a huge step.
Bro,
and now they know.
It still seems like, see, this is what it was interesting. That number's so big. And the reason I'm saying it's so big,
yeah, please explain.
You have to get to a point where you need 400 genes working together in order to replicate life. So that means that before this stage of life being able to get here, say we're just going to call it, this is the smallest. They've got the right now. This is the smallest number of genes in order to replicate and have this thing live.
Right.
It means before that, you couldn't do it with 300 genes.
Yeah.
So how did you get to the 400 if you couldn't get anywhere with 300? Unless you had multiple organisms with a piece of the puzzle, or I don't even know if they're organisms at that point. What do you call it?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think ultimately you could guess, kind of based on what you're saying, Justin, that you could do it with less, but we don't know what the starting point is, right? And
that's what they're figuring out.
Yeah. Engineering. Yeah. So that, in theory, now that we have the 492 gene version, you can kind of start to whittle it down and figure out exactly what is necessary and get it smaller.
And what was necessary were 7 genes to allow normal cellular division. There were 7 genes involved in that out of the 492. So it's just fascinating.
So that's a nicer, smaller number.
It's a nicer
that number.
That number, small, but it has a very discrete function. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but all of those genes, all of those molecules, all working together in tandem to allow life. Yeah. Justin, tell me your story. What's up on your first story here?
So, pop quiz. Get rid of your number 2 pencils. You're not going to need them. Prepare to answer the following question in the form of an American criminal procedural comedy drama television series. Ready? What do all vertebrates have in common?
Vertebrae.
Bones. You're supposed to answer it in the form of American
yes.
criminal procedural comedy.
Oh, I see.
Drama, television type shit. Bones! Yes, they all have bones. That's the thing.
Okay.
All vertebrates have bones and an internal skeleton. These bones that we have are made up of a very complex combination of composite minerals, proteins, living cells that are trapped inside the matrix of the bone. Those living cells are then interconnected by tiny channels so they can exchange electrochemical signals with each other and nutrition and allowing the bone to grow and regenerate. And there's blood production is taking place within the marrow. This is a very complex architectural system there. Where did this originate? Enter the Museum für Naturkunde Berlin team headed by Dr. Florian Witzmann. They have discovered a possible milestone in this development. They tried to go back as far as possible to look at fish that may not have had bones. They examined fossilized samples of bony armor from 2 early fish species that lived around 400 million years ago. One sample was a jawless fish that lived 423 million years ago, belongs to an extinct family. The second is much younger, about 380 million. And so they basically wanted to take a really high-resolution look at this. Quoting Witzmann, it was already known that these early vertebrates had bone cells, but we knew little about how the cells were connected to each other, as well as anything about the detailed structure of the lacuna, or the cavities, in which the bone cells were located in the living animal. In order to be able to make more precise statements about bone metabolism, we had to have a far more detailed image to work from. Quick, to the electron microscopy laboratory. Hit it with the focused gallium ion beams. An electron beam scanner. Later, they had 3D images at a resolution better than any television set your eyes can handle without melting the significant part of your occipital lobe. Even in the older sample, the jawless armored fish, the 3D images display a complex network with the cavities for the bone cells and the tiny channels through the bone interconnecting these cavities. The channels are thousands of times narrower than a human hair, so this is in the fossil record that they're even finding this. Is pretty amazing. And it has been almost completely preserved, they say, over the 400 million years since this thing was alive. So basically, they can see that even 400 million years ago, and these fish, the architecture was already there. It was already well underway.
That transition from cartilaginous to bony structure, right?
So even in early bone even early fossil bone, bone cells were able to do what they do now. Dissolve themselves in places, restore bone minerals where needed. The bones themselves were acting as batteries, storing minerals, releasing them later. Our own bones do this as well. That's why they're so delicious if you're a carnivore, because there's a lot of energy stored in there.
A lot of phosphates, a lot of calcium. Yeah. The bone battery, exactly. I wouldn't have thought of them that way, but yeah, they're a molecular storage device for sure. Yeah, that's cool.
Active metabolism, 400 million year old early vertebrate.
Nice. This is something that started early, and thank goodness it's continued. I am glad for that. I wonder if looking at stuff, the osteocytes, and trying to figure out how all of this stuff works. I love trying to make connections between discoveries of ancient formation and development of traits with understanding how we can approach modern medicine and possible therapeutics. So what kind of understanding at the molecular level can we get that could help something like bone disease, right? How could we do that?
Yeah, so I think one of the most powerful things that we could have would be DNA from this 400 million year old creature, which we do not.
Bones.
We do not.
Just the bones, just the hard structure.
We're not going to get it. But by looking at something like that, but trying to find its closest equivalent in the modern day ocean.
Yeah.
Something that has also undergone evolution, but maybe is sort of stuck in these stages, where maybe there hasn't been a tremendous amount of change in these regions. You might see when you look at the most simplified structure, like you were talking about a minute ago, finding the most simplified structure for replication. Mm-hmm. When you find the most simplified mechanisms and markers for bone growth and dissolving and everything else, you look at where our bones are now evolved to, and you can see, okay, this all has followed the same pathway. What is this that's different? Why has it changed? Is this
why did it change? Yeah.
Yeah.
What forces led to that? Yeah.
And then it also narrows down the list that you might want to look at for some certain bone diseases and the like, right?
For sure. Okay, Blair. Mm-hmm. Speaking of origins, developments, do you have one for me?
Yes, I do. And I forgot to warn you, I'm going to need you to pull up a video from this story. Okay. Apologies to our listeners. Please go to TWIS.org, find the show notes from today, and watch this video, because I thought I knew a lot about animals, but this is something that I had no idea about. So this was trying to find the origin of hopping behavior, where that kind of lives in the genome in animals. And to do that, so researchers from Universidad de Porto and Uppsala University worked together to study a particular kind of rabbit. So there's a rabbit called a sauteur delphore. And
sounds fancy.
It does not hop. Instead, it lifts up its back legs and it walks on its front paws.
What?
So it walks on its hands.
Yeah. It's truly wild. And I had no idea that this existed. So
and now there's a new pet that you would like.
This is some sort of weird, fake, trained rabbit meme onion story. It has to be.
It is not. So if you click on the link in the show notes, there's actually a video of this thing moving. But
I can't see it moving. But look at those rear legs. It's got powerful front paws, which you don't see on a rabbit.
Right.
And it's got these tiny little hind legs, which are usually massive.
Yeah.
Yep. Little
hind legs. So to kind of set the scene here, we know rabbits, hares, kangaroos, some rodents like kangaroo rats and kangaroo mice, their main form of locomotion is jumping. And so this paper in particular was trying to figure out why some animals move by jumping, why some animals do not, where this lives in the genome, because it turns out it's not just the powerful hind legs. It's not just, do you have the muscles for it? You have to have the quintessential building blocks. It's not something you can just build up and do. We can't build up enough muscle to just hop instead of walk. So what they did is they actually bred these weird rabbits that walk on their front legs, the Sauter Delphore rabbits, and they bred with another breed that hops normally to move around. And they compared the offspring genomes. Here we go. It's just bizarre.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So, again, if you're listening to this, you got to check it out. It's bizarre. But yeah, so anyway, so they bred these weird rabbits that don't hop, that walk on their front legs with, I'm going to say, not to judge these rabbits, but normal rabbits that hop. Sorry to
Rabbit shamer.
Yeah. Anyway, so they bred them together to figure out, okay, here are the ones that hop, here are the ones that don't, what's happening in their genome. So there's a mutation in the RAR-related orphan receptor B gene. So that's called the RORB gene. The RORB protein is found in regions of the rabbit's nervous system, like throughout. And this mutation that this funny Sauter Delphore rabbit has a decrease in the number of neurons in the spinal cord that produce RORB. So basically, it's just a reduction in this protein. So the functional RORB gene is necessary for rabbits, and they assume other hopping animals to perform this characteristic jumping, hopping gait. And that builds on previous studies in mice where they actually they inhibited the RORB gene from producing proteins, and they started walking kind of like ducks. So there's something weird related to this protein and the gait of an animal. So this shows an example of abnormal gait behavior that is mapped from a single base change. And so this is the first description of genes required for this particular locomotion. And so this points out the importance of the RORB gene and how it's part of the normal wiring of the spinal cord. So this does mean that, yes, this stops hopping in rabbits, but that also means that this could inhibit locomotion in humans or any vertebrates. It could kind of mess up how the musculature is supposed to function, essentially. So beyond this just being just a bizarre story about a bizarre rabbit that walks on its front legs and why they do that and other rabbits hop, this could actually have some really interesting implications for studies in vertebrates in general. So,
absolutely. Yeah, the implications of a single base change and the effects on gait, on locomotion. I mean, yeah, this is fascinating. Why does it make a mouse walk like a duck? And why does it make a rabbit walk on its front legs instead of its back legs? This is fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean,
especially because none of the rest of the architecture should be there to just change gait mid-evolution. Just to what is it like? There's certain I think cows and pigs or a lot of animals lack the thing like an attachment to the back of the skull that allows them to run fast. Mm-hmm. If they run fast, their head just starts going like crazy because there's no stabilizer for it. All your pursuit carnivores have a really nice thick thing that's holding their heads so their whole body can move and their head is still staying real focused.
Yeah.
Some animals their head just flops all over. So if this gene is messing with that channel, that's a really hard one to overcome. I imagine these have to have been a domesticated genetic fluke and not something that ever survived in the wilderness.
You would not expect to see this.
No, no.
Yeah.
Wild rabbits.
Seems like they have the musculature. Yeah, so they have the musculature to hop, but they have a neuronal kind of stopper keeping them from do that. Yep. And so their body's like, how do I move? Oh, I guess my front legs then.
So is it
I'll just use these. I'll use what I can.
Is it just not forming the nerves all the way down? Like what is?
It's a protein deficiency.
Protein.
Yeah.
Protein deficiency will affect it. Yeah, that'll have carry on effects.
Yeah,
Feedback
but
loops
just for future reference, somebody should tell those rabbits they're doing bipedalism wrong.
Yeah, they are.
It's not the recommended way anyhow.
They could run away to the circus quite effectively. Okay. I'm going to jump us ahead and into our interview. Hey, everyone. If you just tuned in, this is This Week in Science. And if you would like to help us grow, tell a friend about TWIS today. That would be amazing. All right, I would love to introduce our guest for the evening. Michelle Nijhuis is a project editor at The Atlantic, a contributing editor at High Country News, and an award-winning reporter whose work has been published in National Geographic and the New York Times Magazine. She's co-editor of the Science Writers Handbook and lives in White Salmon, Washington, and she has recently published Beloved Beasts, Fighting for Life in an Age of Extinction. Welcome to the show tonight, Michelle.
Hey, thanks for having me. I love those rabbits.
Everybody wants one now.
I want one. I definitely want one.
Thanks so much for joining us. I responded to a tweet of yours where you said I have some extra galleys, and I was like, I would love to see this. And so one thing led to another, and get here, come talk to us about your book.
It was excellent serendipity. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. I'd love to find out, before we dig into the book, though, you were a biologist. You call yourself a lapsed biologist. How did you go from biology to science writing and to now writing this novel?
It's long and tangled tale, but the short version is I majored in biology at Reed College in Portland, Oregon. And I, after college, supported myself by doing a lot of funny jobs, helping out wildlife research projects. I was a field technician, and I worked mostly in the Southwest. So I got to, count plants after wildfires and chase frogs through streams, and most memorably, follow desert tortoises around and take notes on what they ate for a diet study. And that really, the tortoises were fascinating, but what was even more interesting and memorable to me were all the politics around threatened and endangered species at the time. Desert tortoises were and still are a threatened species, and I just couldn't believe that people were talking about these profound, or fighting more commonly about these profound issues, in these meetings that were designed to, work out whether an ORV trail was going to be closed or something like that. And instead people were like, what's our responsibility to this species? Why? And I thought, wow, I know that smart people have come up with answers to these questions, but I don't know what they are. And I would like to know more. So I have always been interested in the history of conservation for that reason and many others. But after I made a living for a couple of years as a field hand, I started as a journalist at High Country News in Colorado, which covers environmental issues around the Western U.S., and started writing about science, which was really my true love.
Yeah, to be a biologist and then to start describing the world around you through writing, it's this transition of this studying the thing you love, and then let me tell other people about it.
Yeah, that transition. That transition well. All of you do. I really like being able to. I had always liked writing, so that part wasn't so much of a switch for me. But I think I'm a generalist at heart, and I just love being able to make the connections, like you guys do every week. You make the connections between different studies and different researchers, some of whom have no idea that, what's going on in another field. And it's so cool to see those connections happen within science, and then connections between scientists and the broader public. as well.
I love that description too, because it is the world of the generalist is getting to keep poking your head into the next lab and finding out what's going on. And if you're in any of those labs, sometimes you can be just completely siloed and so focused on either your field or specifically your own project that you don't look beyond. You don't get to poke your head in all the other doors. So.
Totally. And I've always felt vaguely guilty about it. I feel vaguely guilty about because I know how hard science is. So I feel like I show up, and journalism is hard too, don't get me wrong. But when I show up, at someone's field site and I'm like, well, I'm here for 24 hours. Tell me everything you've done in the last 25 years.
Yeah.
I feel a little bit badly, but I've come to think of being a generalist as a a strength that the world needs. So just as much as it needs the deep focus of the specialists. So
yeah, on that note, though, I mean, there's always that question when people are talking about science writing and being a generalist. There's something about being able to ask the questions that an expert takes for granted.
Yeah, right. Totally.
Explain this to me. I don't know anything about it, or I know this very little bit, and teach me, right?
And we do tackle that in a pretty interesting way when we do this show, which is Kiki and Blair will often read a book that somebody has written. Whereas I'm not even given the name of the guest until serious. So that I can ask exactly those completely uninformed questions that you might after you've read the book, you're like, oh, I get that. Everybody must get that after you read something. But before you do, you're like, well, what is that? I've never even heard of it. So we do that to keep the show a little edgy and
Yeah, I don't know what book you might be talking about, but I mean, as a journalist, you get too deep into a subject also, and sometimes I'll go home to my family and I'll tell them oh, and I found out all about this, and then they'll ask me some question that I'm like, I have no idea because I didn't ask, and it's something that's really basic but really important. So I think those we all need our perspective takers.
Mm-hmm. So much. And so from the perspective of you're studying the history of conservation and the world around you, you're kind of steeping yourself in it as a science journalist for a number of years. What led you to finally go, I have to write this book?
Mm-hmm. Well, I had been stewing about the history of conservation for a long time, always finding it really interesting and always trying to fit what my editors called too much backstory and I thought was very important context into my stories. But I just kept thinking there's a story here that at least no one I know of has really pieced together. We all know, I think, at least a couple of the famous names in conservation. People have heard of Rachel Carson. Maybe they've heard of John Muir, who founded the Sierra Club, or Aldo Leopold, who wrote a Sound County Almanac. But we don't have a sense of this is a tradition that's accomplished some things. When we think about conservation, I think, just as I'm speaking as just a typical media consumer, we're oh, it's about endangered species. It's about these species of which there are only 2 members left. That's sort of the typical story you hear about on the news. And I knew that it was more than that. And I knew people had learned things, over the last 100 years or so. And I just felt like it would be useful to put that together and kind of look at what had been accomplished, because we have done some good. We've done some good for other species in addition to doing a lot of bad. And I didn't want to write a book that was just about another book about how horrible things were. I wanted to offer some kind of hope, and the version of genuine hope I felt like I could offer was, hey, look, we actually have done some other species that a lot of people don't think about, and we can keep doing them,
And I think that's really important to that, all conservationists kind of need to know what other conservationists are up to, because there's so many ways where if you have a particular species or habitat or interest that you're trying to protect, that there's overlap, right? And there's opportunity for collaboration to really amplify impact. And I think, that's something that the modern conservation movement is still, I think, trying to figure out, is how to coordinate all those kind of distinct efforts.
Sure. I mean, it's like we were just talking about, people get siloed, not only because they're super focused on their problem, but, conservation in many ways is such an emergency, and they don't feel like they can take the time often, to reach out and make connections with people who might be working on similar problems, just because everything seems so pressing, because it is pressing.
But so, you mentioned also like a species, right? And so that's also one of the big questions is, are you saving the species where there's only 2 individuals left? Are you helping bring the California condor back from the brink of extinction? Or are you saving genes? Are you saving biodiversity? Are you saving variety? Like,
yeah. I mean, and I think conservationists, people who are professional conservationists and do it for a living, do have a sense at this point. We've been trying to save species from extinction and trying to preserve healthy populations of species for, on a global scale for 100 years or so. And at this point, they have a sense that conservation is about protecting relationships, among organisms and among species and between species in their habitats. But I don't think the average person who cares about other creatures thinks about it that way. I think they mostly think, oh, it's about saving one species at a time.
The panda.
And yeah, about the panda. I mean, I can't, and I do have some anecdata about this, because when I was working on this book, I can't tell you the number of people who I would say, oh, well, it's about the history of conservation. They would say, oh, well, are you going to talk about the bald eagle? And I was like, well, yes, and I love bald eagles, but it's actually about much more than that. And, people who really, cared about these things and knew quite a bit about them. So, yeah, I think and I think that has to do with the way we as journalists cover those issues and the way that conservation groups present them. They always are, falling back on flagship species. And I think the media and conservation organizations need to take some more risks and, show us some more ugly species and show us some species, doing things together to show us that conservation is a much more complicated and kind of more rewarding job than you think it is.
So we have a frequent argument, me and Blair, about what's the right path forward. I think that we should convince people to avoid going into nature, to really love heavily, overly urbanized areas with scant nature around, and give them no desire to go near nature, because even if they really love it, they can only hurt it. And I think, Blair, is your argument that if you don't expose them to enough nature, then they just don't care about it at all?
So there's some cases of ecotourism that obviously like brings money and resources and awareness into areas, right? So I think I just feel like it's a little more nuanced than that, perhaps.
Really?
But what's the right solution? Because we can't keep encroaching if we are to preserve it. There's going to just be more people wanting to take the tour every year. There's going to be twice as many every 30, 40 years, whatever it is.
Yeah. I mean, I guess what I would love to see conservation organizations emphasize more is that conservation should be happening everywhere. We've come to think of it as something that happens out there on the calendar picture, on the calendar landscape. Mm-hmm. And, it happens there. And, big reserves are really important for all kinds of reasons. But really, everyone should be a conservationist, and it shouldn't be an exceptional thing. We need everyone to be thinking about it. And there are all kinds of habitats where all of us live. They're not perfect, but
right.
They're functional. They serve other species in sometimes in really surprisingly cool ways. So I'm a little bit both and on that. I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm all for getting people to be like, get familiar with your normal natural environment. Your squirrels, your raccoons, and your rats. That's basically what we're all going to be living with. That's our nature that most people will see.
Yeah, but this week there's a story that it's published in Nature that has just done an analysis and found that the average person who doesn't go out and chop down any trees but buys coffee and products with palm oil and chocolate and these things that we love in our modern urban world, and maybe buys them without a second thought as to where they come from, are responsible for, on average, 3.9 trees being destroyed every year. And so they have found that it's people in the G7 countries, in urban developed countries, that our consumption habits are having an impact on deforestation in tropical areas that are at-risk ecosystems for biodiversity loss. And so, maybe here is where the message is. You don't have to be the Pacific Rim Trail hiker, right? You don't have to be that you don't have to be that nature loving, but maybe just understand that even in the city, your actions have impacts.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important to understand those connections. And at the same time, I would hope that conservationists make their message more, conservation organizations make their message about more than just consumer decisions.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's important, no doubt. Like, every person who, cleans up their act is saving 3.9 trees, and those 3.9 trees, times however many million add up. Yeah. So they're really important, but I also think political action is important too. And so getting the word out about systemic changes that would truly make a difference. The first thing that comes to mind for me is legitimizing or affirming indigenous land rights in high biodiversity countries. I mean, that's one of the most efficient and effective ways to protect big.
Put it back in the hands of people that were conserving for many millennia. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean
that could work.
Not to put the burden on them, or to assume that indigenous
those skills still exist.
Are going to just inevitably conserve their land, but just we know from experience and research that when people have secure tenure to their land, they tend to do a really good job of protecting it for the long term. So I'd love to see more, yes, clean up your own act in your backyard, and yes, protect your backyard from, protect the habitats in your backyard, but also, think.
Oh no.
Uh-oh.
She went away. That was a complete out. Maybe she had
She's like, think about it.
Think about it. I gotta go.
Yeah. Mic drop. Absolutely.
Oh, here she comes back. Let's get her back in there.
Oh,
hi. I don't know what happened.
All of a sudden it said, "You're done."
Oh, no.
That's so.
It was very mean. But
yeah, Kiki knocked that off.
Anyway, yeah, long answer to your question, but
but you were saying for people to think about things.
For people to think about systemic changes that can make a difference. I mean, it's also less depressing to think about systemic changes. I just have this really strong memory of seeing An Inconvenient Truth when it first came out, and I watched the whole thing, the whole slide presentation, no tears, and then I got to the end, and Al Gore said, "You should change your light bulbs," and that's when I welled up, because it was just so, the gap between action and problem was so huge. And so I feel like saying, yes, do that. Do that on your own, do that with your household, but also plug into this larger effort, because that'll give you some constructive hope.
Yeah, and I think that also that my big problem with that whole idea, it also is that it takes socioeconomical and cultural factors completely away, right?
Yeah,
So it's kind of, it's on you to buy an electric car, to change your light bulbs, to buy sustainable coffee that costs twice as much, to do all these things. And the burden shouldn't be the financial, logistical, just the adjustment. All of that should not be on the individual. It needs to be the easy choice, right? It's I've brought it up a million times in the show, but it's the idea that if you have the paper towels next to the sink and the electric hand dryer behind you, you're going to grab those paper towels every single time.
Totally.
And so you need to make the correct choice the easier one.
Right. Yeah. And that takes systemic change. I mean, I lived off the grid for many years, and I had a small footprint. But then, there was no public transportation where I lived. So, I didn't have it. Those efforts need to be literally plugged into a grid.
So you were off-grid living. That's awesome.
Yeah.
For 15 years?
Yeah. When I lived in rural Colorado, I lived off the grid in a house that my partner built. And, it was great. I loved it. We had solar power, and we did have a very, when we were in our house, our carbon footprint was very small, but not everyone can do that, first of all. And then second of all, there were a lot of things that we didn't have. We needed to share resources in order to do them efficiently, and we couldn't do that because of just the geography and
the isolation. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I think those tend to work better in communities.
Yeah.
There's actually down in the Southwest in TWIS, I think there's an Earthship community that is set up that is all off grid, that all has, they've got these solar and they're using passive heating for the winter time and that sort of thing. But having a group of those that are sort of in it together, I think would be probably a little bit easier to have a community built around that too.
Share all those resources.
Kiki wants to ask that. I'll wait.
Yeah. So I was thinking about the systemic change and Blair's comment about how it's kind of put on the consumer, and just thinking about the historical view of where these conservation efforts have been historically. The initial aspects of the conservation movement were very white male, colonial, maintaining the status quo, and you talk about that a lot in your book. A lot of the decisions and efforts that were made were to maintain that white male power imbalance, and it seems as though Do you think, it seems to me as though this is like a shift it to the future through capitalism and maintaining a power structure?
When we talk about individual efforts.
Yeah, individual efforts versus systemic.
Yeah, I think that's true. And the early history of conservation is full of white dude energy, unfortunately. And it has improved a great deal. And I think one of the concrete things that improvement has brought about is a greater emphasis on, community-led conservation efforts. Like I was just talking about on, indigenous and community and rural community-owned land where people really are, they might be subsistence hunters or farmers, but they really are reconnecting with their neighboring species through collective management efforts that allow them to benefit from conservation in some way and relieve the burdens and the costs of conservation. And I think those kinds of efforts really do get at the kind of systemic change that's needed and get away from this, like, well, we'll just, capitalism will save us. Spend more money on our coffee.
And it won't alone. This is one of the interesting things, is that we have almost nobody who is involved in housing outside of some local regulatory. And so everybody who's providing housing is not providing housing, they're in business. it's all a profit business. So nobody cares really the quality of the housing outside of some sort of legal limits we've put on the minimum that can be done. It seems like if we're looking at in conservation on a larger scale, I don't see how individual communities themselves are really going to be equipped to outbid developers, outbid mineral companies, this sort of thing. It seems like we would need a sort of a federal mandate to conserve X amount of land and make it permanent.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I was talking about indigenous and rural community land rights, because, that's why it's so hard for people in developing countries to do any kind of long-term management, because they never know when some giant corporation X is going to come in and scrape out a gold mine. I agree with you here. There's a form of that's needed here as well. We do need traditional conservation. We do need parks and reserves, because we can't let the market decide how land gets used. Conservation always costs something in the short term, and the market is set up to respond to short-term demand, not long-term, not what we all need, which is, air and water and biodiversity for the long term.
I think
not the long-term needs of survival. That's not what the market responds to.
We should talk to the people who are interested in the market in the terms of, it's a bank. We're putting things in savings, and conservation is like putting our assets in savings, and we're gonna let them accrue interest.
Yeah.
I think this is something we talk about on the show consistently, that there keeps being stories about this. How do we get the real economic evaluation of biodiversity and conservation reflected in the global market? How do we get that to happen? I feel like that really would jumpstart a lot of this, because no matter how bad the average person wants conservation to happen, those systemic changes aren't going to happen unless it becomes very clear that there is an economic benefit, which we know there is.
Yeah.
Science knows there is,
right.
But it's not trickling into that.
Yeah. And I mean, Gretchen Daly at Stanford has been working for years on ecological valuation and trying to put a price tag on ecosystem services. And, of course, there's a lot of people who say, well, you can never have the value of an ecosystem reflected in a price tag, which is true, but it would certainly be better to have it be greater than zero, which it is.
Negative.
But here's
negative. Right.
Here's the part. Here's where I don't agree with this argument. It's partly because of bothering with that at all. It's because I don't know who that convinces. I don't think that if you're trying to influence Wall Street or government that's tied to finance, that's doing deficit spending and is doing everything short term, I don't think they like we were talking before, I don't think it even registers with them. If they're not gaining personally immediately from it, business interests don't care what your economic numbers are throwing around. I have no interest in this. And if that's who we're trying to convince, I say we skip it. I say we just skip that whole, put the efforts somewhere else. And when you're talking about loss of a species, I mean, you look at any nations, every state has a state bird, and it probably has a state lizard, and now they have a state flower.
Yes,
they probably have a state every kind of something.
They sure do.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So we are on some very governmental level aware that we are identified by the nature in our region, and just preserving that as a state pride, or like that thing you're talking about, wanting to. Who cares about the turtles because we got all these trails here? Well, this is part of why people have moved there. It's for the nature that's there.
Right.
So you're then destroying the state itself. I don't know. I don't think the whole trying to convince the world that there's a benefit to fresh air and clean water when every tailpipe is saying they don't care.
Yeah. But I do think, I mean, if and I'm not, I mean, I certainly don't think corporations are going to solve our problems, but I do think there's a value in there are opportunities to say, look, we've calculated that this ecosystem is worth X amount of money over the next 20 years, and you could actually get rewarded for preserving it, for preserving that value. So there may be mechanisms that are more persuasive than what you're talking about, which I agree is not going to work. But really, I mean, the larger problem is that I think that conservation, because it's populated by so many biologists or people with biology background, we have worked for decades to understand what species need to survive. How much space they need, how much habitat, where it needs to be, how it needs to be connected. That's what conservation biology has done for decades. That's what ecology was doing for decades before that. But the science, or the social science of how to get people to conserve land, or the economics of it, all those things are just in their infancy. And so I think we just have a very rudimentary understanding of how to change corporate behavior, how to change human behavior. And, the hour is late, but there's a lot of really, I think there are so many huge questions that could be answered that there a lot could be accomplished with we've been paying so little attention to it that just paying a little bit more could accomplish a lot.
Do you see?
Is that right? Is this the optimistic book that you wrote? Yeah. Okay. No, I'm just checking in there because. Okay. Whew.
Yeah, I mean, the optimism is we know what to do, we know what we need to do.
Yeah.
But we don't know how to get there. But we do know the questions.
Yeah.
So it's like we do and we don't.
Yeah, one of the things I thought was just fantastic about your book was the weaving of the personal stories of these personalities who were involved in advancing the field, right? In advancing conservation as a movement. The idea that because of Linnaeus coming up with a system of naming species, suddenly we could name the things and then they became important or not important, whereas before they were so vague, right? And then to move from there into, it was fascinating to me to see you weave from that initiation of the concept of a species to the, the Western perspective, the colonialist perspective that really was, we're going to use the land and take it over and it's ours. And I think even growing up in the 80s and 90s, I came across that perspective very often. And even into the 1990s, would see writing by people from a perspective that the land is ours. We can do what we want with it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is hundreds of years of time, and we're still, like,
Standing
within
Rock?
20, 30 years, barely changing, barely putting a nick in that. So how much do you think, like, how much work, where do you think we start to put the lever against it to start to change this more?
Yeah, I mean, no question. I did try to write an optimistic book, but there's no question. I mean, I don't want to downplay the challenges, but I will say that, when William Hornaday, who was a taxidermist and a horrible person in many many respects, but did do a lot of good for the American plains bison, and is one of the reasons why we have them today. When he decided that he didn't want to see the bison go extinct, people were really just coming to terms with the fact that humans could drive a species extinct, like that. And that was in the late 1800s. I mean, it had been known for a while that species could go extinct, and then it was kind of, Darwin had mentioned, in the mid 1800s, humans can drive species extinct, but it's okay, don't worry about it.
Don't worry, there'll be another one.
This was like some sort of
another one. But so I guess what
this
I'm
was some
saying,
sort of belief that overnight, each night, like the world was just populated by more animals. Like this was like a real thing that people thought. They didn't really understand breeding that took place in nature was like a process of a limited or a set number of individuals. Yeah. Like that concept, it really didn't exist.
Yeah. People thought that, people had a lot of faith that species were created by God and they never changed. But so I guess what I feel like it's easy to look at the history of conservation and say, well, there's been so little progress. But on the other hand, I look at it and I say, well, it was barely 100 years ago that we didn't even know it was possible to drive a species extinct. And so in a way, you know, we're way behind, and I don't want to minimize that. We're so behind, but we have learned a ton over the past century, and you know, we have such a sophisticated understanding of what species need. And there are a lot of species on the planet today that wouldn't be here were it not for human effort. And I think it's important to remember that, because it is easy to think like, oh my God, there's nothing, you know, especially we're all stuck in our houses still because of the pandemic. It's been a hard year for optimism, but but it's like we have done good for other species. And I think it's really important not to fall into this sort of, oh my God, humans can only do damage, because we've shown that's not true. And so it's a big lift, but it's possible. It's not, you know, because we've shown it's possible, and I think it's still possible.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really amazing success stories out there. Even animals that are not doing well, and we're not necessarily our fault. There are some cases, but there are some really cool things like the I think it's the Florida panther almost went extinct, but then we crossbred them with mountain lions, and then so we use
they're pumas at heart, right? They're all
we
species.
used our knowledge of genetics and conservation and, you know, breeding and all these sorts of things, and we were able to put all that together and save a species. And I think that it is important to stop and celebrate success, because there's such an amazing breadth of knowledge that we've developed, and we're still reporting on every week that will help equip us if we can move forward on conservation. We have a lot of baseline knowledge that will help propel us through. And especially with, you know, like a seed vault essentially for genes. There's a lot of opportunities there with potential future use of that frozen the sperm and eggs and all sorts of stuff. So
we have a lot of technical tools, and also, I mean, a lot of conservation is really pretty simple. Like a lot, like, you know, most species are not yet directly endangered by climate change. They're, you know, they will be if we don't solve climate change, but they are, what they're still endangered by is the same thing they've been endangered by for 100 years, which is too many people are shooting them, and too many people, you know, and too many people are destroying their habitat. And so, I mean, of course, the economics and the social science of all that is very complicated, but the facts of what we have to do are not that complex.
I have a question with respect to saving species versus ecosystems. Bringing back a mammoth could potentially benefit ecosystems. Would you be pro mammoth? What is your mammoth stance?
What is my mammoth stance? I am extremely pro mammoth in a sense, but I'm not pro mammoth in the sense that I think you mean. I think I feel like I'm maybe joining a conversation that's been going on here for a long time. Okay. Let's tell me what the territory is.
Justin is pro and I am essentially anti, because my thing is they went extinct due to
climate change,
systematic change on the planet, and they were no longer supported. And we have lots of other endangered or extinct species that are actually adapted to the planet we currently live on, and I would rather bring those back.
Yeah. And my point is, like, well, how long is too far removed for something that may have been hunted to the brink? at one point. You know, how is the 10,000? Like, what happens if you reintroduce the mammoth to the Canadian landscape? Is there more nutrients getting moved around in the soil? Are there different plant species that start to show up? Is that biome? Can it be potentially harboring more life forms than we consider?
Could it be richer? Yeah.
Reintroducing the wolf and the beaver, right, to Montana. Are there all these extra effects that we are just glossing over because, but you know.
And I stand in the middle between the two of them, and I moderate.
Yeah.
Point. Separate. Fight.
I would be as interested as anyone else in seeing a bunch of elephant mammoth hybrids running around. I'm not even going to call them mammoths because I think the whole thing is a branding exercise. Right. They're not mammoths. They would be, well, first of all, they don't exist.
Yeah.
Were they to exist, they would be hybrid animals. And so we're not de-extincting anything as people.
So we should get rid of that Florida panther thing. Because it's just... See, this is how it gets. Then I get very contentious with the whole conversation. Well, then we get rid of all of the hybridized conservation things.
Let me finish. I mean... My issue with it is that I don't have a problem with hybrids running around. I just have a problem with the overpromising of it. And I have a problem with and this is may not particularly be anyone's fault, but it depresses me how much oxygen the whole conversation takes up. Because I feel like, conservation can be really boring. It's a gradual process, and the politics are complicated, and progress is really slow. And then someone comes along and is like, you know what? We could just make more mammoths. And
it's sexy and exciting, and
I mean, no doubt the ethical issues are fascinating. The potential ecological issues are fascinating. It's fun to talk about. And then the promise of like, oh my God, we might not have to bother with all that other stuff. That would be so cool.
But do we need these sorts of ambassadors though? I mean, like sort of like what the panda has done for conservation. And Blair, I think, also maybe disagrees with me on this, that the panda has done any good for conservation by taking so much of the oxygen out of the room, kind of a thing. But it did get, I think, as a poster child, a way to, drum up money for conservation that could be applied to other places. I mean, we can't expect, can we, the general population to take interest in the mundane that they don't maybe understand or care about yet.
Well, I think we could try a lot harder to make the mundane interesting, and like not be so drawn to the shiny object that the so-called de-extinction that is the shiny object. And the trouble I have with it as a poster child. I mean, I think that there's some poster children have done some good for conservation. I don't think pandas have done a lot of good. In fact, there's some new research that says that actually they haven't been that great for the ecosystem.
They're trying not to exist. They're trying, as Blair is always pointing out, they're trying not to exist. They're working against themselves constantly.
There are some species like that are just, you don't feel like evolution has their best interest in heart. But I feel like the other thing, of the many things that drive me crazy about the hybrid mammoth elephants, the theoretical hybrid mammoth elephant, is that it's such a primitive form of conservation. Like 150 years ago, when we saved the bison, we put them on a train from the Bronx and trucked them out to the plains and plunked them down like they were cows. And like, that was great at the time because ecology was really young. People didn't have a sense of the ecosystem. And so basically what we're talking about is doing almost the same thing and just kind of seeing what happens to the ecosystem instead of preserving the many functioning, assemblages of species and ecosystems that we still have and that nobody's doing much about.
But isn't this also, like, Blair's talking about this gene bank? At some point, we have to be taking on, if things keep continuing like this. We have the conservation effort, but we also then, at some point, will be transitioning into species management, where we're really controlling, like they've been doing throughout the Sierras with certain fish populations. We're up there kind of playing God with the populations, mixing up fish from different waterways just to keep the populations going and diverse enough to survive and rebound.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going in that direction anyway. I think this would be a great learning experience that would have a high profile.
Really pushing for it.
I am. I think there's angles to it that make sense in the bigger picture.
Meanwhile, there's a whole nother side of conservation that actually I would love your opinion on, Michelle, while we're talking about it, which is this idea of categorizing species as to how much effort, money, what have you, should go into their conservation. And this takes into account several things, including maybe they're too far gone, which I think is a really, I used to work at a zoo, and it was really heartbreaking when this conversation started. And I worked specifically with fishing cats, and fishing cats had been listed as a species that was maybe too far gone, and maybe they were going to stop putting money into, and, you know, I think there was a lot of controversy, and it ended up kind of falling through in the end. But I kind of would like your opinion, based on the research that you've done, on prioritizing species.
Yeah, on triage is what it's been called. For years, and it's tough. I do think, gosh, I mean, there's definitely a place. What actually I would love to see us put more public money into, is protecting common species, because those are the cheapest species to save. And we know that when they get endangered, they're really expensive to save. And, you know, we're not giving the state governments are where conservation of common species happen, and they don't, because, and they're mostly, those efforts are mostly supported by hunting, and because not as many people are hunting, they're running out of money. So we really need like a new funding model to protect abundance. But I think, you know, understandably, we also want to protect endangered species. Nobody wants to be the person to, you know, pull the metaphorical plug. I do think there's a point at which we have to say, we're not going to spend public money on this species anymore. You know, it requires too many heroic measures. It's, you know, there is a point where it's, you know, it's draining resources that would do much more good. But that's not to say that, you know, private funders can't come in and say, you know, like I spent some time at the at the Rhino Center in San Diego, where they're trying to what they call rewind the extinction of the northern white rhino subspecies by doing this, you know, very groundbreaking research on reproductive technologies, which could potentially save other species, other highly endangered species, if it's perfected. And that is mostly privately funded. And, you know, I think it's a speculative effort. They all know it's a real long shot. And I think it's valuable in its way, but I don't think we need to be spending taxpayer money on it. When that could be doing, you know, we could be getting a lot more bang for our proverbial buck.
So I guess my follow-up to that is, is there a way, can we circumvent this difficult conversation about prioritizing species by just focusing on habitats? This is like my soapbox thing, right? Is how can we shift, is it possible to shift the research, the funding, and the kind of the PR focus of conservation from the species level to the habitat level, so we don't have to make these difficult decisions?
Yeah, I would love to see it happen. I think that's when, I mean, I was just talking about state government funding. That's what, you know, that's what a lot of state wildlife agencies do, ideally. You know, some of them don't do their jobs, but what, you know, that's what they're tasked with doing, is protecting habitat. And the problem we have in the US, and the problem we have worldwide actually with the IUCN and its red list, is that we have taken this species focused approach to conservation. And so all of our, like our legal structure, our political structure, and even our emotional investment is at the species level. So it's a very, I mean, I totally agree that that would be better for the ecosystems that we want to save. I'm not sure how, politically and legally we approach it.
Isn't there a movement currently to try and get, 30% of the world's surface preserved by?
Yeah, there is, and Biden has written
all in the ocean. No.
But yeah, Biden wrote that into his climate executive order during his first couple weeks in office. And yeah, that's gained a lot of momentum. And if it gets written into the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is their 10-year goals are being set again at the end of this year, that could make, and if Indigenous land rights are written into that, which they should be, that could make a huge difference. And it could tilt, I think, a lot of the attention of the conservation movement toward habitats, which is, I think, its intent. But I mean, we've been thinking about species for a long time, and I think to some extent that will always be with us. But I totally agree with you that we need to be shifting the focus and maybe talking about groups of species. Maybe we can wean ourselves from the idea by talking about communities of species and how they use certain habitats.
Is everybody familiar with the concept of a living fence? Or it's got another name. I think it's more common in Europe or UK. But where they build like a hedge fence that can be used as like a highway for, all sorts of critters to move around and back and forth and sort of avoid roads and people. What if we just do that? We just a giant public works project where we just remove, like, do a big swath straight across the United States. It's just like, we have a couple overpasses, maybe an underpass, so we get through the thing. We just leave that and just don't touch it. Just nobody goes there. We know this big swath is left for the animals. They'll wander out once in a while. They might walk through a local suburb occasionally. But for the most part, we'll get a good section of the biomes and just leave it. Just leave it. Just don't touch it. What can't live there just didn't make it. What does happen?
Let's get an infrastructure bill.
Yeah. It's the easiest infrastructure bill. We don't have to maintain it. We don't have to build it. We just have to get out of the way. That's it.
Sounds green belt.
Yeah. Just a giant swath.
Sounds like a living wall. Like
it's just a living wall through the and build that wall. So don't. But at some point it sounds crazy to just make that swath, and anything that happens to have a biome that matches that lives, and anything that it's not deserty enough, the desert stuff died. It's not cold enough, and too bad nothing lives there. But basically we're doing that piecemeal all over the place. If we at least create one shot gigantic national park across the country.
There is tons of ideas. People have so many ideas. And like Michelle said before, we know the science. It's changing minds. It's changing systems. It's changing patterns. This book is really fantastic. I got to sit by the ocean looking at the waves and read these stories of these people and conservation. And it was a whole moment for me personally, but I'm really enjoying it. Yeah.
If you want to save the world and want the most optimistic take on how to do so.
But there is in the first chapter, at the very end of your first chapter, you end the first chapter and start the book with the paragraph, or there's one more word I use sparingly here: hope. Hope is the subject of much discussion in conservation circles, both the need for it and the lack of it. Yet few, if any, of the most influential early conservationists were motivated by what might be called hope. They did it anyway. I'm scooching forward. As Leopold, in one of his grimmer moods, wrote to a friend, that the situation is hopeless should not prevent us from doing our best. And I think those are just really wonderful words. And if you were to give your message of hope and what you want people to get out of this book, what do you hope that people get from reading your book?
I hope that they can learn from this book or see from in this book that there have been more successes than many of us realize. And as we've talked about, that we do know what needs to be done. We don't always know how to accomplish it, but we know what we need to accomplish. And, you know, despite everything that's facing us, we're not as special as we think we are. that there are that a lot of people, and the reason I didn't use the word hope, as I said, was that I was just moved by all these people in conservation history who really had no particular reason to be optimistic that what they were going to do was going to work out. And in fact, most of them thought it probably wouldn't. And, you know, they were working, you know, at the start of the Great Depression, at the beginning of world wars, through world wars, you know, at times of great uncertainty and chaos. And I think that they can be an example to us that they, you know, they just kept doing what they thought was right and contributing in the way that they thought they could contribute the most. And I hope that people will take from the book that that is still worth doing despite it all.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our conversation and for sharing your book. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so fun to be here.
It's been really great having you on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where can people find you and your book?
They can find my book anywhere books are sold. It's called Beloved Beasts. And if they want to learn more about me and what I do, they can go to belovedbeastsbook.com. We'll send you to this website. And that has more information about the book and where I'll be showing up over the next few weeks and giving talks and so forth.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you. Thanks to all three of you. Great to be here.
It's been wonderful. Have a wonderful night.
Take care.
You too.
Bye.
All right, everybody.
I feel like this whole interview requires I feel like we need some kind of a call to action at the end of this. Like
after this whole conversation.
Yeah, yes. I feel like, you know, like it almost feels like this is okay, I'm ready to sign up.
Read the book.
I gotta read the book. I gotta find out where to sign up. I gotta get the book, because in the book it'll tell me where I can be applying efforts. That's the thing. I'm ready though now.
Oh, awesome!
But we still
right?
gotta finish the show.
Ready? Let's do it. We can all apply a little pressure here and there. We can do what we think is right. This is This Week in Science. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm going to close a couple of windows here and tell you that in a few weeks, what is it, April 17th, you will be able to find us mingling and mixing ideas, mixing our science with the technology of the Daily Tech News Show. April 17th at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, we will be science and teching it up. So put it on your calendars and stay tuned for more information as we get links and all that kind of stuff set up. And if you have ideas for what you want to hear us mind meld about with the Daily Tech News Show team, send us an email. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And now, as we come back from this wonderful interview, it is time for a part of the show that we all know and love as Blair's Science Superhero Origin Story Animal Corner.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. If you want to hear about animals, she's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. than a reporter.
Okay.
Rose, oh, right. What you got, Blair?
I was waiting. Like, I can't start until the question is asked. Okay. Well, I have a really fun story. Not funny, fun story about octopuses. Always amazing when octopuses make an appearance in the Animal Corner. And this is a study looking at octopus sleep. Did you know that octopuses sleep? They do.
I did not. I mean, I guess I expect most animals to sleep in some way because that's a thing.
Yeah, and there's restorative properties to sleep, and we know that octopuses have a weird donut-shaped brain, but a brain nonetheless, which means sleep is probably important,
donuts.
Right? Yes, donuts. And so this is a study all about octopus sleep. So you might have seen videos on the internet at some point of an octopus sleeping, and you might have seen this cool color and texture changing happening all over the octopus as it sleeps. And this study specifically wanted to look at if there were multiple types of sleep that an octopus exhibited, kind of like humans. So this is from the Brain Institute of the Federal University of Rio Grande do Norte in Brazil. And this was looking at, it turns out there are two alternating sleep states for octopuses, an active sleep stage and a quiet sleep stage. Scientists scientists have always thought that only humans are special. So scientists used
historically, scientists were very human-centric.
Yes, absolutely, yes. Oh, it's so special that we do this and that. So scientists used to think that only mammals and birds had two sleep states. More recently, surprise, they found that reptiles also show non-REM and REM sleep. And a REM sleep-like state was also recently reported, kind of anecdotally, in cuttlefish. But so this brought them to look at octopuses because they exhibit this wild sleep pattern where they change their color and texture, and their suckers move and all sorts of stuff. So they captured video recordings of octopuses in the lab. During quiet sleep, they were still and quiet. They had pale skin. Their eye pupils contracted to a slit. So they don't have eyelids. So they sleep with their eyes open like fish do, but their pupil is so special compared to just normal fish eyes, because they have the ability to contract their pupil like we do. So but they have this pupil.
I think it looks like they're opening and closing their eye because the way they contract it, it's like, oh, they're shutting their eyelids. Nope, no eyelids. Just a squishing pupil. Yep. Yeah,
so their skin around their eye is changing texture and their pupil is contracting to a slit. So yeah, it looks like they're closing their eye. Yeah. So that's during their quiet sleep. During active sleep, this is when their skin color and texture were changing, their eyes moved around a bunch, and their suckers contracted, and their body twitched and moved around. And the active sleep occurs after a long quiet sleep, which is generally longer than 6 minutes, and it has this characteristic periodicity that would repeat about every 30 to 40 minutes. Sound familiar? It's starting to sound like REM sleep, right?
Yes.
And how do they know they're asleep? Because as I mentioned, they don't have eyelids. Well, they measured their arousal threshold using visual and tactile simulation tests. It's basically they tried to wave this, more scientific than this, but it's basically like they waved their eyes in front of their hand in front of their eyes, and then they like poked them.
They're poke the octopus, see if it responds.
Hello, octopus, poke, 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 poke. Seems to be asleep. So the result of those tests showed that in both the active and quiet sleep states, they needed a stronger stimulus to evoke a behavioral response. So they were sleeping. This, of course, has implications for the evolution of sleep because either this is convergent or there are origins of sleep dating back as far as 500 million years, because that's when the divergence between cephalopods and vertebrates occurred. So one of those two things. And so if these two different sleep states evolve twice independently, invertebrates and invertebrates, that means there's some sort of essential evolutionary pressure shaping this process in order to have a centralized nervous system. You can't decouple a centralized nervous system and sleep, is what this would mean. So if you're going to become extra smart and have a centralized nervous system, you're going to get sleep. Or, as I said, maybe everybody does it, and it has this 500 million year old connection of sleep. So the next kind of studies for this group would be to record neural data from cephalopods to understand what's going on in their donut brain while they sleep. And they'd also like to know the role of sleep in their metabolisms, thinking, and learning. So if you sleep deprive an octopus, can it kind of behave as well in behavioral tests, right? Can it perform as well? Does it affect their ability to metabolize food? Do they get tired? Do they die sooner, right? So these are all things that would be a great question to kind of follow through with. And how
necessary are these sleep cycles to an octopus's survival?
Yeah, absolutely. Does it show sleep deprivation kind of symptoms like humans do? So senior author Siddhartha Ribeiro said, I love this, it is tempting to speculate that, just like in humans, dreaming in the octopus may help to adapt to environmental challenges and promote learning. Do octopuses have nightmares? Could octopuses' dreams be inscribed on their dynamic skill patterns? Could we learn to read the dreams by quantifying these changes? So I like the idea of thinking about octopuses dreaming, having nightmares, storing memory, all the sorts of things that happens to us. But yeah, dreaming octopuses.
Huh. More study required, but it looks really interesting. And I love the evolutionary aspect of this having evolved multiple times. That,
Or not.
Or not.
That's the thing. They really kind of focus on this idea that it's coupled to brain development. But I'm sitting here going, what if like unicellular little kind of cilia covered little protists, what if they dream? We don't know they don't dream. What do you want to call dreaming? Like, do they shut down for part of the time and just chill? Is that considered sleep? Is that considered? So I don't know. I understand dreaming is supposed to be a very particular brainwave pattern and all these sorts of things. So I could be going a bit far with the single-celled organism. But I do think it's worth considering that maybe anything with a glob of nerves, anything that is kind of like a brain, could they dream? It's possible.
Right. What is quiescent? What is active? What is,
This is why we need
question.
to create sentient mice and give them a dream journal so that when they wake up, they can jot down any dreams they had, and then we'll know.
But if you're creating sentient mice, then of course they have sentience, consciousness, and so then it's a moot point. Of course they're going to dream then.
Mice are sentient, guys. It's fine. They already are.
They already rule the world.
Anyway, moving from dreams to fangs, I want to talk about venom.
Okay.
Would you like to be venomous, Kiki?
Yes.
Okay, Justin? Would you like to be venomous?
I feel like at some point I'd bite my own tongue and die.
Oh, that's fair. This is
Well, I mean, you'd think that if you're venomous, you're gonna not be.
I don't know. I don't know how many times
I don't think that would affect you.
I don't know how often snakes accidentally bite themselves. Yeah, I don't know how that.
It happens. It does happen sometimes because they're long and thin. You know, they're like.
And do they just like no big deal?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
It's fine.
Yeah. Anyway, so the reason I ask is we may have found out how to make humans venomous. Let me take a step back.
What?
No,
wait.
This is like
repeat that before you said that
this
fast.
is the sensationalist headline that was all over the internet. So this is one of those stories that I'm bringing today to kind of take a step back and explain what the actual science is. So the headlines all over the internet was, how to make a human venomous. But really what the story is about is the evolutionary origin of venom in snakes, and that we share some of the building blocks with venomous snakes as mammals.
Ooh.
So, Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology Graduate University and the Australian National University have found the genetic foundation required for oral venom, and it is present in both reptiles and mammals. Yes, so there's an underlying molecular link between venom glands in snakes and the salivary glands in mammals. So instead of saliva, you could be spitting venom. So venom has arisen in so many animals and animal types. So we have venomous jellyfish, of course. We have venomous spiders, of course. We have venomous scorpions, snakes, and we have some mammals, like, for example, the platypus and the Slow-loris. So there are mammals that have venom. We know this already, but their venom delivery method is claw-based. It's in their paws. So if we're talking about a venomous mammal in terms of a bite, we don't have that. So they all have different ways to deliver their venom. But this latest research wants to look at specifically the oral delivery of venom and, like I said, its connection to salivary glands. This was looking at venomous snakes, specifically a pit viper found in Asia from Taiwan. It's called the Taiwan habu snake. They looked at the genes that work alongside and interact with venom genes. They found the adjacent genes and they wanted to look at them and then compare them to other stuff. So previously, scientists have focused on genes that code for proteins that make up the mixture, but many of the toxins found in venom were incorporated after the oral venom system was already established. This is why you have antivenoms that are different for different snakes, is because their specific toxins are different. But there has to be something in common at the base of all that with the development of an oral venom system. So they wanted to look at the genes that were present before the origin of venom, which enabled the rise of these individual venom systems. So they identified around 3,000 of cooperating genes that played roles in protecting the cells from stress caused by producing lots of proteins. So they are cranking out these venom proteins, and that can cause stress to your system. They were also key in regulating protein modification and folding. If they don't fold right, they're not venomous. If they don't fold right, they could poison you. There's a million things that can happen wrong if the protein doesn't fold right. Then they looked at the genomes of other animals, and that included dogs, chimps, humans, and they found that they contained their own versions of these genes. And when they looked at salivary gland tissues within mammals, they found that the genes had similar patterns of activity to the snake venom glands. So this is the first real solid evidence for the theory that venom glands evolved from salivary glands. And while snakes then, quote, went crazy, incorporating many different toxins into their venom and increasing the number of genes involved in producing venom, mammals like shrews that produce venom, they created a much simpler venom that actually is very similar to saliva. And the ease with which the function of salivary glands can be repurposed to be venomous is surprising. It's a pretty easy switch. And so scientists could start looking at other mammals and how easily they can turn them venomous. So here's a quote. Quote, if under certain ecological conditions, mice that produce more toxic proteins in their saliva have better reproductive success, then in, just a few thousand years, you could see venomous mice.
Yikes.
Yes. So, it's probably not going to happen, but this does
we've already got shrews. Come on.
I love it if it, also, I just love it, just the snake cornering a field mouse, and then it's like the little vampire reveal.
Yeah.
And the snake is like suddenly terrified.
Yes. It's like the Indiana Jones scene where the guy pulls out a sword and then he just pulls out a gun. It's like,
and shoots him.
Yeah.
And shoots. You know how many innocent people he kills in that movie, by the way?
Well, all right,
He's
anyway.
a mass
Anyway,
murder
let's
spree.
do the show.
Let me
Anyway,
finish my
sorry.
venom story. So obviously mice, we don't think they're on this evolutionary path to become venomous. Like, they would have by now. They've been around a while. But I also like this little addition, although very unlikely. If the right ecological conditions ever existed, humans too could be venomous. It's not going to happen. There's
not going to happen.
There's absolutely no reason that would occur. But it's, they're just saying we have the genes. Now,
Somebody's going to want to.
Gene modification technology.
Somebody's going to want to do it.
yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
you could.
You can go sci-fi with this if you want. Now, I did want to pull up
sci-fi.
this story from last summer that was looking at venom glands in amphibians, because I wanted to draw a connection because it's actually a pretty different story, but it's along a similar line of just venom. It's not unique to snakes. It didn't evolve a bunch of separate times. It seems like it really did have a singular origin, and then it kind of blossomed in different ways throughout evolutionary history. But this was specifically looking at embryonic analysis, and they were looking at the fact that there are oral glands in these amphibians that had the ability to develop venom. So basically, they have the same developmental embryonic origin as the venom glands in snakes, but they turn into these dental glands in caecilians, this type of amphibian. So it related, similar. So this is looking at embryonic development. And then this other story that I brought today is looking at the genetics behind it. So they could be linked, they could be related, but ultimately the origin of venom, oral venom, seems to be pretty far back, and there are vestiges of that throughout the fossil record, basically, is what this boils down to. It's in amphibians, it's in snakes, and reptiles, it's in mammals. We all have it.
Yeah. So where does evolutionarily, where does that point? Where's the convergence?
It's when good proteins go bad. It's when proteins allow an adaptation to take place, like Blair was saying. It's the proteins are there. The network of molecules that enable the protein folding and everything to happen, they're all there. And then there's a change that allows you to overstimulate your prey, or you're able to kill your prey more effectively, or like Blair was saying, better reproduction or whatever.
So we're not speculating then that there was some ancient ancestor that we're all linked to that had venom for a little while and then just dropped it? It seems
possible. So I think this is
Maybe?
the thing that future research is going to have to look at. Yeah. But based on this story we brought last summer, that there's the developmental origin of what gives us venomous snakes is also in these caecilians, these amphibians.
Amphibians, yeah.
Would lead you to believe that the common ancestor between reptiles and amphibians had at least the developmental building blocks for this. But that's the thing where I think it gets really difficult, is that in the caecilians, it developed into these weird, like, leaky dental spoon-shaped things in their mouths, and in snakes it turned into fangs with injectors. So did their common ancestor also have venom capabilities, or did their common ancestor just have the developmental possibility to create venom, right? And so I think that is where it becomes really difficult, is the genes are there, the structures are there, but did they develop to completion?
We don't know.
However many millions of years ago. And that is what we don't know.
Maybe it didn't, and that's why they didn't stick around.
Right? Right.
Quick shout out to Dan Christensen and I think it's the YouTube chat room for the in-chat donation, and for correctly calling that, you're right, shrews are venomous.
Yeah.
That's called it ahead of the reveal. That part of the story. Right?
That's right.
Ahead of the reveal. You know what I'm going to be revealing right now?
What?
That, Justin, it's your turn to talk about science.
Ooh.
Science. Okay,
What story are you
this
gonna
is
hop
an interesting
on?
story. This is a team of researchers from the Universidad de Sao Paulo, Universidad Federal do Rio Grande do Sul, and Universitat Pompeu Fabra, which I think are all in South America somewhere. Anyway, they found evidence of genetic Australasian influence in more parts of South America. If you weren't aware that they had discovered any genetic early Australasian influence in South America, apparently there was. I didn't even know about this study. Somehow I missed it as well. Back in 2015, researchers found what they described as Australasian influence in native people living in the Amazon. That would be people with genetic markers associated with the early populations of South Asia, Australia, and Melanesia. In their papers published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, the group now describes their study, this next round study, of a genomic data set from multiple South American populations across the continent that are also showing this sign. So, theories that explain how this signal could have been introduced into people living in South America are tough, considering it has not been found in any early people living in North America. Current population theory is that North America and South America were populated by people migrating over from Asia via Siberia to Alaska, then waiting for a glacial event to melt, and then continuing down and then populating North America and then South America, although they might have kind of headed to South America along the coast quicker. It's sort of tough because while this is upheld by most of the evidence we have, it isn't perfect. The oldest human activity that we've seen in the Americas is now this cave in Mexico that's 30,000 years old. There are a number of South American sites that are likely somewhere between that 30,000-year-old age and then the oldest stuff in North America. So if you were just going to go off of no other information but the age of the sites, you would say started in Mexico, headed to South America, and then moved to North America. Now, the genetic information still is backing up the transition from Siberia to the Americas. That's still the correct overriding theory.
Yeah.
But this experiment that they just did involved collecting blood samples from native peoples all across the midsection of South American continent. They conducted the genetic analysis, and all they studied samples from 383 people, included 438,000 plus markers within the genome that they were looking for. Researchers found the Australasian marker in native people living in the Brazilian plateau, in the center of the country, and also those living in the western part of the country. They also found the signal from the Chotuna people in Peru. Findings suggest migrations of people were far more widespread in South America than were thought. The findings also suggest that there were a couple waves of such migration. This has led to some scrutiny of previous theories about how people got to South America. Some suggest, though, that this may be a problem because many lineages in North America were wiped out by European colonial genocide. So we might not have a full picture of North American genome, and I don't know how much access we have to ancient North American genome because of some treaty issues that have taken place where we're not really allowed to do a lot of analysis without a lot of express permission, and that permission has been begrudging over time to look at ancient population DNA. Yeah. We have had some exceptions, but it's, for the most part, we don't have a very good map of North American indigenous.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so closer study, though, they also think, though, there's another thing that says, if we just look at that North American population, the data that we do have, we should eventually find this signal there as well.
Yeah.
Most enticing possibility is, of course, that a population of early people from Australasia somehow made their way all the way across the Pacific directly to the shores of South America, which is not supported by any other evidence at this point.
Aside from the fact of the genetic marker. Yeah.
Yeah, which is pretty good. That's a pretty good signal. But it can't be ruled out either because of that genetic marker. So yeah, like there's a lot of a lot of interesting questions that arise from this.
I mean, people have rowed across the Indian Ocean, the Pacific. I mean,
that's the other thing about it too, which is it wouldn't need to be that big of a population.
Yeah, it's a long trip, though.
It's a long trip, but it's also not. It's not saying that the Americas now were populated by a cross-Pacific, Southern Pacific crossing event. Mm-hmm. It's not there. But the admixture does tell you that either when people showed up to South America, they might have run into people who were already there, or, you know, could have been the other way. We don't know. We have no idea, but it's this absolutely fascinating question, puzzle thing that needs to get tracked down now. Very exciting. This is a very exciting time for paleoanthropology.
So cool. Need more data.
Mm-hmm. More data.
More data.
Oh, and then more stories. More stories.
You have more stories.
Yeah.
Cool.
So this is quotey voice of Gloria Choi, Associate Professor of Brain and Cognitive Sciences at MIT, member of the Pick Our Institute, if you're familiar. I'm not. Quoting, as a community, it's very important for animals to be able to socially distance themselves from sick individuals, as all of us now totally understand. Especially in species like mice, although I'd say humans is a safe bet too. Especially in species like mice, where mating is instinctively driven, it's imperative to be able to have a mechanism that can shut it down when the risk is high. To explore whether mice would change their innate behavior when exposed to sick animals, researchers placed mice in the same cage with either a healthy female, that's male mice, must be. Yes, male mice in the same cage with either a healthy female or a female that was showing signs of illness. And they had this bacteria that they injected with them that kind of made them sick, but wasn't too dangerous. They found out that the males engaged much less with the sick females and made no effort to mount them. So the whole got a headache thing, apparently. I think you have to go with fever. I've got fever and cold sweats, and I have an off pallor. Anyway.
You don't look so hot. Why don't you stay home?
Think about just having drip it, just so congested, just like the bright red nose and the
not a problem.
The covered in just tissues in every pocket. It's just really just maybe doesn't get you going, and that might be why.
Right.
Yeah, doesn't really. Those aren't really the I want to date you right now signs, right?
Yeah, no. Exactly.
Snot, vomit, even.
There's a reason. There's a reason that being sick is quote unquote gross, right?
But what is that reason? Researchers.
It's a go away signal.
But what is that signal? Researchers didn't stop with just that observation. They tried to identify the brain circuitry underlying the mouse overcoming their instinctual behavior of wanting to mount the member of the opposite sex. Mice have a lot of intercourse. We talk about bonobos a lot. Mice, big time into the sex thing. Okay, so what they said the Vemer, I'm going to have to, phonetically, I'm sorry. Vomeronasal organ, which processes pheromones, feeds into part of the amygdala called the coapium, and the MIT team found that this region is activated by the presence of the bacteria-injected mice. Further experiments revealed that this activity of the coapium is necessary to suppress the male's mating behavior in the presence of sick females. When coapium activity was turned off, males would continue to try to mount sick females. Wasn't the appearance of snot. They needed to have this signal in the brain, which is probably being triggered by that.
There's a trigger.
There's a trigger. Additionally, artificially stimulating the CoAMP suppressed mating behavior in males even when they were around healthy females. So they could actually get stimulate this and get them to, I guess, think everybody was sick or act like everyone else was sick.
Yep.
The research also showed that it communicates with another part of the amygdala called the medial amygdala, and this communication, carried by a hormone, is necessary to suppress the mating behavior. The link to this which is called thyrotropin releasing hormone, TRH, is intriguing, Troy says, because thyroid dysfunction in humans has been implicated in depression and social withdrawal.
Yeah, that's an interesting point on this study where it's thyroid dysfunction could have this influence on human behavior, not the mounting effect, but just like you said, social withdrawal, people choosing to not be around other people more often because there's a signal in their brain that is kind of pushing them to do that.
But what's really interesting then is it sort of changes your perspective of why somebody is being a little antisocial and depressed in this sort of way, or withdrawing. If they're having the same feeling that Blair would have if everybody was walking around with number 11s, right, coming out of their noses, then yeah, all of us would be like, I'm really not into hanging out with you people today because it's me. I just don't feel like it. Not because you're all revolting. And
yeah. I mean, it's such an interesting question where there's a behavior when you look at it in a model species like a mouse that is this repetitive stereotyped behavior that, a mouse is going to do it, no matter what, unless you take that part of the brain and go, you're not going to do it anymore. Right. And so you start seeing that there are these levers in the brain, these switches that can be turned on and turned off that lead to different behaviors. But then when it comes to an animal like humans that are a bit more complicated than a mouse, we like to hope, that because of the layers of cognition that are involved in certain pro-social behaviors, they are going to have effects, but maybe not the same effects as they would have on a mouse, right? But it's really interesting to dig into this on an animal level.
I think it also is interesting to think about it on a system level because one of the things I just thought of too is that, not to bring it to humans again, but the human flu season is also the stay at home and nest season. And, we always assumed that was just because it's cold out, but maybe there's something else going on there.
Right. We're seeing people sick and going, I'm just going to stay home. I don't need to be around other people right now as much. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Could be bigger.
I'll do a very short version of the story. Researchers with the CERN-based Alpha collaboration have announced the world's first laser-based manipulation of antimatter. Leveraging a made-in-Canada laser system to cool a sample of antimatter down to near absolute zero. This is published in the journal Nature, and it is considered an absolute breakthrough because they used a made-in-Canada laser.
Justin.
Incredible. Didn't think they were ever going to get that done. Wow. It's my shortest story of the night.
That's your story? That's your take on the story?
I can keep going with the story. That's, to me, there's stuff about, being able to then, now that you can control a little bit of antimatter, now what research can we do? This was something that they've been working on for 40 years. It's quite a breakthrough. But really, the highlight of the story, as you can tell from the fact that it is in the first sentence of the press release, is that it was done with a made-in-Canada laser. They're very proud.
They're very proud.
We did it! We made a laser. Which is, amplifying light down a tube. It's Very, very impressive, Canada.
That is amplifying light down a tube, and that these lasers are helping them manipulate antimatter, which we're just getting a handle on. This is very exciting for our understanding of the universe. Thanks, Canada. Thanks for your lasers. We appreciate that. All right, I have some stories. First, I want to say thank you once again for joining us for This Week in Science. All right, my science. What do I have?
Wait, sorry, this is just coming in. Okay.
What?
It was assembled in Canada, I think is what.
Made in, assembled in. Oh, verbs. Oh, verbs.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'll stop being the interrupting cow.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to start with a story that is a follow-on from the interview and from conversations we have also had on the show many times about invasive species and conservation. Well, it turns out that snakes, rats, cats, all the invasive species in the world, according to researchers in France, that invasive species have cost $1.3 trillion to the global economy since 1970. It's an average of $26.8 billion per year. And it's almost as much as, it's not quite as much as the infrastructure bill that's being proposed right now. But anyway, study published in Nature, researchers have been counting all the costs that invasive species have had in the world. And they came up with a top 10 number of invasive pest species. They're groups of species, mostly, that are having the most influence and doing the most damage around the world. And on this list, I named a few off the top, but let's talk about who the most costly invasive species are. Mosquitoes. They are by far the most costly invasive species at a level of $148.7 billion. And then we have rats and mice coming in at 67.1. We have cats. Cats are number 3 on the most bad list of invasive species.
I'm only surprised they weren't higher.
I know, they're third. And then we have Formosan subterranean termites, red imported fire ants, brown tree snakes, Mexican cotton boll weevils, gypsy moths, Africanized bees, and New World screwworms.
Screwworms.
That's right. They screwed us. Anyway, there's a lot for these animals and the trouble that they have been causing. And guess what?
What?
Another study has determined that the pets that we like the most, hey cats, what's up, are most likely to become invasive species. That there is a certain combination of traits that leads to basically generalists that are able to adapt to ecosystems and be able to survive. And they did some mathematical modeling and then some experiments with ants and have pretty much come to the conclusion that we're bad people for the pets that we like to choose because our pets are highly likely to become invasive species that are then going to go on and cost trillions of dollars to the global economy.
Well, they probably started it, right, as an invasive species to begin with. But they were so adaptable. They were already out serial killing. They were adapting to anything.
And then we said, hey, be our pets. No.
But they got, I think so. They probably just were amenable enough to be around people. Like, we were this close to, like, if raccoons and squirrels could just chill out a little bit more and play along, they could take the role of cats and dogs. They could be like, Are you a cat person or a dog person? Or a squirrel person or a raccoon person? You'd have to ask all these questions. But they never made that transition quite. But the dogs and cats probably just hung around being invasive with humans.
So that's usually not the direction it goes. Usually we decide we like pets, and then the pets get into the environment and start causing trouble. And the one thing about this study that I thought was really interesting, their analysis, they started out looking at which species are more or less likely to be invasive. And if pets were if pets didn't have any invasive characteristics to them, if they're not likely or not at all or whatever, if they're just not that invasive, you'd expect that they would be equally distributed among all the species. But what they found is that invasive mammal species were present at 5 times the rate in the pet trade as they are in the wild around the planet. So it's similar for birds, for amphibians, and all sorts of different animals, fish. Anyway, all the species, we like invasive ones as pets. We probably made them invasive, but anyhow.
Well, there are places where they purposefully released cats too. Cats like when I lived in Israel, there were
to kill the rats, which were
everywhere.
invasive.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So the Brits were like, "Oh yeah, let's just release a bunch of cats out there to take care of the rats and mice that we accidentally brought here."
Yep. And then I don't know. On a good note, though, if you do happen to have a garden and you want to do something good for the world, know that your urban garden is having a beneficial effect on pollinators. A new study that just came out in the Journal of Ecology suggests that urban areas in the United Kingdom, this was in the UK, are a significant source of nectar and floral diversity for insects. And so this is a good thing. They were looking to understand how the nectar supply differs between urban and rural areas and where nectar sources are concentrated in urban settings. And so they started looking at where things were. And basically they discovered that your garden can be a refuge and a source of sustenance for those pollinators that we need.
And the reason that they're pointing to your garden is because everywhere else that is controlled by the city, they're not going to take the effort to maintain something like wildflowers. They're going to put crushed granite and concrete over everything.
Possibly,
so there's no there's
less
like,
lower maintenance, yeah.
There's very little. This is sort of also the thing I was thinking about when we were doing the interview. There's very little land where I'm at, anywhere, that is not heavily managed by humans. I mean, granted, most of my surroundings are farmland, which are by nature completely manipulated by man. But within the city, there's not really any wild areas. It's
so listen to this
concrete.
though. Listen to this though. So this is in the UK. The researchers sampled in and around 12 towns and cities. They were in areas categorized as urban, farmland, or nature reserve. And urban and farmland had higher numbers of non-native plants than nature preserves. They found that all 3 of them had about the same amounts of nectar. The urban sources of nectar, 85% was attributed to gardens. However, even paved areas contributed to nectar sources, in some instances with flowering shrubs growing through cracks or in parking lots. But within gardens, 83% of nectar-producing plants were non-native. So
that's always a problem.
That's an issue also, but there's nectar, and that's good for the insects.
This is where Justin's green belt he was talking about before would be super helpful.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, green space is so important. If you can do it in your backyard, but kind of part of the community level thing we were talking about with our interview is if there's legislation or particular representatives who want to favor more green space in your area, that is another really important thing to support.
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately you need kind of that higher level support to make sure that land is saved or converted back to green space when possible.
Yeah, possibly. Okay. I'm going to take us away from conservation, though, and now I'm going to take us in robotic sci-fi land. It's here.
Right.
It's here. Last year, researchers reported their Xenobot. The Xenobot was a biological robot created out of layers of skin cells and cardiac cells from Xenopus frog embryos. So they called it Xenobot. They created these little micro machines out of biological parts that could function, that could move around. And they moved around and they did little things. And they're like, look, biological robot. This is so cool. Well, they went back to the drawing board and decided to play with their design of Xenobot a bit further. And now they have the sequel to Xenobot and have created, as they say, a cellular platform for the development of synthetic living machines. They are reporting a method for generation of in vitro biological robots from Xenopus laevis cells, so frog cells. They exhibit coordinated locomotion via cilia present on their surfaces. So they took frog embryos, took stem cells from the frog embryos, allowed those stem cells to grow into little spheroids, little balls of cells, and those little spheroids then started to grow little hairy appendages all over them. Cilia, naturally. It's a natural process. It wasn't something that the researchers made the cells do. The cells did it themselves. There are lots of natural, normal processes in which cilia arise in biological systems all the time, like our gut lining and all sorts of things. So these little cells got cilia all over the outside of them. And so the researchers took them at that point and they started using them to make little robots. And so they basically have created these little robots that are amenable to high throughput projects. They arise by this cellular self-organization. They don't need any external stuff, no scaffolds, no microprinting. And you can also, they can be damaged. They tested them. They cut these cells, like a significant slice out of the cells, and the cells healed themselves within 5 minutes and were able to go on about their business. They're amenable to surgical, genetic, chemical, and optical stimulation during this self-assembly process. They can navigate aqueous environments in diverse ways. And they have emergent group behavior. So these little tiny cells, there's a video of these little tiny cells wiggling around. And in my view, I don't think it looks emergent. Group behavior doesn't look like, but they are moving around in the same area together. And in their motion are able to potentially collect little iron particles in the environment and move them out of the environment. These are not smart machines, but the machines have been, they have a genetic switch, a genetic trigger to have a memory of 1 bit on or off. And so with this genetic trigger, which is a fluorescent protein, if they are exposed to blue light, they will fluoresce and they will have that memory of, quote unquote, memory of having been exposed to a particular light signal. So what they can do with this kind of model system is send these little frog bots into environmental, biological ecosystems, into areas where they can play cleanup. They're thinking about using these xenobots for cleaning up microplastics, and all sorts of things that are difficult for humans to do, but that these little frog bots kind of do on their own. Frog bots, xenobots.
Spent so much time wondering if you could. Didn't stop to think about if you should. Yeah, that's interesting. It's kind of scary.
It seems as though it's pushing this single, because these are single cells. These are little cilia-covered, single-celled frog organism bots. So, yeah, is it pushing things in a an evolutionary direction? Would they be influenced in some way? They are biological. They can adapt. They can, if they survive and reproduce, then that potentially becomes something. At this point in time, they survive a short period of time as long as they've got amniotic fluid nutrients to be able to rely on. Otherwise, they go into a sort of stasis if they are in and can remain in a stasis state for a fairly long period of time if they run out of nutrients or if they're taken out of a nutrient situation. But they can't reproduce on their own. They're just frog cells that move around.
On one hand, essentially remote-controlled single-celled organisms could be super helpful in the medical field.
Yes.
Super helpful. On the other hand, could kind of go the other way.
On the other hand,
it's one of those technology falls into the wrong hands sort of thing.
yeah.
With the great medical and military applications of our new technology, we will save half and kill half of the planet at any time we choose.
That's right. Snap. It's a snap.
Yeah, it seems always to be also this sort of deficit anytime we have done something that is very designed in terms of life, which is that we have created something that can perform a task that maybe we would not have been able to just find anything in nature to simulate the activity. We can really engineer that. Only problem is we don't have all of the rest of evolution that took place to make a thing able to survive stochastically against many situations. So we're creating these born sick hybrid poodle things that are really good at fetching, but then if the temperature goes up 5 or down 5 degrees, they just die. They just can't
exactly
survive.
I mean, at some point, maybe there will be these biological, soft-bodied machines that we will, that we'll be using, that will be helping us. Right now, what this is a platform for investigation. I mean, there is an emergent swarm behavior in these little single-celled organisms. That's interesting. Maybe there's something to learn there about swarm behavior. So the bioengineering aspect of it also is, that's still under development. This is definitely not release the frog cells into the wild stage yet at all. But Xenobots 2, the sequel, has arisen. It has.
Stuff does escape from labs. Was it the I don't know where it is, which Jackson lab it is, but they had the escape, I think. Maybe not. No, it was probably not a Jackson lab, but somewhere they had the Doogie Howser mice escaped from a lab. The Doogie Howser mice.
The rats of Nim.
Yeah, the Doogie Howser mice were these mice that were. Are they rats? Maybe they're rats.
Yeah, they were mice. Yeah.
They were designed to be exceedingly intelligent compared to other mice. And they were being utilized for experiment because they had apparently really good memories and some decent, cognitive abilities. So they were really fun to run these complicated cognitive experiments on. And some of them have escaped over the years and are out there in the wild breeding a potentially super intelligent race of mice that is interesting that we haven't heard anything about.
In a while.
They figured it out.
Either that or they bred with wild mice and bred the smart right out of them.
Mm-hmm.
You have to.
My money's on that one. For sure.
Yeah.
You have to, at some level, always acknowledge when you're dealing with anything that you're going to let it out.
Yep.
Inadvertently, of course. Accidentally, of course. Unknowingly. This is always true with every chemical compound that we create. Just like every drug has a side effect that we don't find out about until 20 years later, 30 years later, 40 years later. It's always
just like my anxieties and my stresses. I just push them deep down inside, but eventually they come out. No.
Like so much microplastic.
Like so much.
In your bodily fluids. Yeah, that's going to happen.
It's gonna happen. But you know what else is gonna happen?
What?
We're gonna get to the end of the show.
Oh.
We did it. We did get
we
to
do
the end of the show.
Did we do the shout out for the get together thingy?
I did it once, but I will do it again now.
I missed it. That's my fault.
Yeah, you left the room.
That's
But
what
a
I'm
reminder,
over.
everyone, put it on your calendar, April 17th, for the TWIS DTNS crossover science and technology show! 4 p.m. Pacific time, April 17th. Mark your calendar. It's going to be great. And let us know what you want us to talk about. You really should. Okay, so now it's time for us to say the thanks and the things and to, there's my run sheet. It's time for a few shout outs. Shout outs to Fada. Thank you for your help making the show notes and the descriptions, the social media, doing all that work. Really appreciate it. Gord, thank you for all your help in the chat room. Identity 4, thank you for recording the show. And Rachel, we know you're real. Thank you for your assistance. I would also love to thank our Patreon sponsors for their continued support. Thank you to Karen Tozzi, Woody MS, Andre Bissett, Chris Wozniak, Dave Bunn, Vegard Shefstad, Hal Snyder, Donathan Styles, a.k.a. Don Stylo, John Scioli, Guillaume, John Lee, Ali Coffin, Gaurav Sharma, Shubru, Darwin Hanna, Donald Mundus, Stephen Aldebaran, Daryl Myshak, Stu Pollock, Andrew Swanson, Fred S104, Sky, Luke, Paul Ronovich, Kevin Reardon, Noodles Jack, Brian Carrington, Matt Bass, Joshua Fury, Sean and Nina Lamb, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenfo, Gene Tellier, Steve Leisman, a.k.a. Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Dana Pearson, Richard, Brendan Minish, Johnny Gridley, Kevin Railsback, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, Mark Massaros, Artyom, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Robert Coburn, Rudy Garcia, David Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul, Rick Ramus, Matt Sutter, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Craig Landon, Mountain Sloth, Jim Drapeau, Sarah Chavez, Sue Doster, Jason Olds, David Neighbor, Eric Knapp, E.O., Kevin Parachan, Aaron Luthen, Steve DeBell, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul Stanton, Paul Disney, Patrick Pecoraro, Tony Steele, Ulysses Adkins, Brian Condren, and Jason Roberts. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. And if any of you are interested in helping us out on Patreon, head over to twist.org and click on that Patreon link. And on next week's show, Wednesday, that is going to be, wait, it's on the calendar. What is the date? It's World Beaver Day next Wednesday. And we are going to have an interview with a beaver expert next week.
No way, really?
Yes, way.
Wow.
We are.
That's exciting.
Yes, it's very exciting. And I didn't write it down. Did I write it down in the show notes? Of course I didn't write it down in the show notes as to what his name is so that I can remember everything right now.
Good. But don't tell me. I don't want to know.
Why would I tell you?
Until right before the show. So yeah, on next week's show, we will be back Wednesday, 8 p.m. Pacific Time, broadcasting live from our YouTube and Facebook type channels, as well as from twist.org/live.
Want to listen to us as a podcast? Just search for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe as well.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes and links to stories will be available on our website, www.twist.org, where you can also sign up for the newsletter.
You can also contact us directly. Email Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistminion@gmail.com, or me, Blair, at blairbaz@twist.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, in that subject line, or your email is going to get spam filtered all the way into the dreams of octopuses.
Wow, that sounds really complicated. You know what's even better and easier? Hit us up on the Twitter, where we are at TWIS Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jacksonfly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes to you in the night, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This week in science. This week in science. This week in science, it's the end of the world, so I'm setting
Ben Goldfarb, that's his name.
It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth.
He wrote a book called Eager, The Surprising Secret Life of Beavers and Why They Matter.
This week in science. 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 This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 I've got one disclaimer and it shouldn't be news.
Big shout out to Dan Christensen. Thank you for that donation during the show.
And I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. Jeopardy. And this week in science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. 'Cause it's this week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in science. This week in science.
Watching this show.
This week in science. 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 Got a laundry list of items I want to address. From stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought. And I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This week in science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say. And if you've learned anything from the words that we've said, then please just remember it's all in your head. 'Cause it's this week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in 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 science.
I'm just going to watch Blair training Sadie and get good lessons on how I should train my cats. I don't think my cats are trainable.
They definitely are. Are they
I know they are.
Are they food motivated?
Very. Yes. Yes, I'm sure. I'm sure I can get my... You can do it. Jump up, Sadie. Come on, Sadie. Come up.
Come on.
Come on. Come up, Sadie. Touch. Touch.
Good girl.
Oh, yes.
Touch.
Up, up.
Come on.
Up, up, up. Come on.
You got it. Good girl.
Yay.
Good girl.
She did it. Good job, Sadie. You win.
Barth Ender, you're very wrong about that. It says Sadie's just learning if she waits long enough, you'll give her the treat just for being cute. No.
No.
No. We work for treats in this house.
Seriously. I mean, you've been clicker training Brian, so.
I forgot about that. It's so funny. Oh, man.
Did. Everyone says, yay, go Sadie.
Yes.
How's my chat room? Oh, good, Noodles. Your TWIS hoodie. Isn't it the nicest? It's like a good thickness. They are good hoodies. Goody hoodies.
Goody.
The TWIS hoodies, yeah. Thanks for getting a hoodie. Glad you like it. Hot Rod says, give your pet affection, not food, as a reward for proper training. It depends on the pet, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there are also dogs who like will work for a tennis ball, which like it just depends. But like
Depends on the animal.
She loves affection, and affection is part of her training. But she wouldn't do much if there wasn't food involved. And I don't use super caloric treats usually. I use just her food, which is enough for her. So that way it's just part of her diet. It's not like giving her diabetes or anything.
Yeah. Diabetes.
Yeah. But sometimes when she does stuff, she just gets affection. Yeah. And that's okay.
As she should. Oh, there's a Justin. I see you, Justin.
Oh yeah, TN I saw became a Patreon patron today.
Oh, thanks for joining us, TN.
$50 a month level.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Very
Thank you, TN.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We absolutely get by with a lot of love from the listeners.
Yeah.
We are absolutely keeping this show going.
Absolutely.
So much so. So much. I mean, I would have to take advertisers if it weren't for all the patrons. I've thought about going to advertising and having an ad-free feed for the patrons, which we could do, maybe.
We had a couple ads when I started. But
Yeah, I've had ads on and off through the years.
But we haven't had like
sorry.
the level where we're pitching product.
You can't.
Really. I mean, we pitched. What do we pitch? Like what was it?
Audible.
The Audible.
It was
like,
audio.
hey, do you like
yeah.
books? You can listen to a book if reading is tedious for you. You know, that's. I don't feel like that's a very hard sell.
No. Yeah. And we're just encouraging people to find knowledge. That's good.
Yeah, that's
Knowledge
nice.
and literature. That's all good.
And it's like I've said before, I think advertising for me, even I don't want to just take any advertising. It's like a relationship with our listeners, with the audience. We have a relationship. I
Because
don't want
otherwise
to
we'd be
sell
like,
that out.
Can you imagine though if we were like,
Fun, good night.
if we had like followed every big advertising push? So again, we just want to reiterate we are the advice we're about to give you is disclaimer, brought to you by the good people that produce the hydroxychloroquine, who are telling you that it cures what ails you. And next, any amount of pain is too much pain. That's why opiates are harmless and fine to take.
Ooh, yeah.
Also, buy my pillow.
Moving along, there's a pillow that apparently can fix spina bifida and glaucoma, and like several other diseases. This can't be right. Can we fact check this before we go to air? I'm not. Oh, can I tell you though? This is okay. I know. Right now, I don't know where the vote is at. There's a thing going on with Amazon and a unionization thing.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to avoid. However, before this was going on, before this was like taking place, the beginning of the month almost, like a while ago, I ordered my food from Amazon to get it delivered.
Yeah.
Including a 10-ounce.
Did it come from Whole Foods?
No, actually, you know what? I avoid Whole Foods. No, I do. I absolutely avoid Whole Foods because this is a reverse. This is why I would suck doing a promo. Like, I'm about to say something nice about Amazon, but Whole Foods sent me this supposed Dijon mustard. That was the color of mustard, but that's the only resemblance. That's the only resemblance it had to mustard. Is that it was the color of mustard. It was the most like, I love every kind of mustard.
Are you mad at this mustard?
I have 5
feel
mustards.
Like you're mad at this mustard.
I have 5 mustards in my fridge right now. This one ruined a piece of bread, basically, is what it did. And ended up, the whole thing went right into, I had to actually taste it again just to see if, like, why I did that. I didn't touch the whole thing just went straight to trash. I got like 5 other mustards. I just mixed it up. I like mustards.
Panoramic was in there. Panoramic.
So, but no, this is the thing. This is the thing that happened though. I got a recall notice on
the mustard?
Hummus. On hummus. No, this is a separate story. I got a recall notice. I won't say the brand, but it's because you haven't heard. There's a certain batch of the Sabra hummus that's been recalled for salmonella.
I did not know that. That's issue.
Now, and the reason I got the notice is because I had ordered it and gotten it.
Mustard.
Not the mustard. We're talking hummus. I had ordered the hummus, and now I get this notice saying, if it's this lot, to check the labels, the thing, toss it out. We had FDA sampled, and they found salmonella in some of the samples. Now, turnaround time wasn't perfect because I've already eaten this hummus. I'm fine. I either didn't get one with enough salmonella or it wasn't the right lot. I don't know now. But the thing that I'm just like been blowing my mind about this is that how many food recalls are there? The grocery store doesn't know who you are and doesn't have your number and your email and doesn't call you and say, hey, the milk you just bought on Tuesday, don't finish it, toss it.
The lettuce.
Here's a refund, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you have to watch like the local news or something.
And who does that anymore?
Or check, go check FDA recall lists every day to see like how that information gets out has always been just such a joke. And here it is. Here's the purchase that's tracked to your name and your address. And here's the recall notice that we got and are providing it and sending that on to you. That is the most brilliant piece of added value Amazon food delivery. I'm just like that added so much value to the whole. They still like I've not gotten a tomato that wasn't like squished or about to go bad. I'm still upset with the tomatoes.
But if they were salmonella tomatoes, you would know.
I'd know about it a month after I ate them. But still, it's got to catch up a little bit. The turnaround's got to be faster. But that's just as soon as that's just the process of figuring out when they had a problem, I guess. And it might not have been. It might be that because I've been ordering this, they're pointing this out, even if even if it wasn't the batch that I got sent. I don't know. I don't have the packaging left to compare it to because it's already gone. But I still that was, I thought, really cool.
Eric in Alaska is bringing up loyalty cards that he got a recall notice from a grocery store based on the information on the loyalty card. So if you're actually using a loyalty card that is yours and attached to the right phone number, then that can work. That would not have worked for me when I used to shop at a big store because I used the loyalty card of somebody's roommate from 10 years prior that everybody just passed that phone number along and we all kept using it wasn't ours. He got all the free sandwiches.
And also got called all the time for food recalls. I was like, I haven't gone
I didn't
shopping.
buy that.
Why are they telling me?
Yeah. Right, and Thunder Beaver, you always use fake info for those things. Right, lots of people don't put the right information into them. It's just I just want to get the discount. Yo, come on.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. I was pretty impressed with at least their attempt to give me the heads up.
Hot Rod said there's one California lettuce plantation that's literally across the street from a cow ranch with a few thousand cattle. I wonder where the E. coli is coming from. The lettuce farmer defends this by saying they have had this set up for years and only recently the E. coli breakout happened. Yikes.
Well, isn't the E. coli in lettuce doesn't that have to do with humans in the field?
Yeah, usually.
Yeah.
Or water. It's
is
water
it, or
cleanliness.
is that
too.
a convenient scapegoat? Because
Myth?
I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know how true that is.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, because you're using fertilizer from various animal sources.
Well, and in other countries, people
Boba. Who's talking about boba?
clean their produce with like a 10%. Is it 10% bleach solution?
Yeah.
So that's something also that like we're just super spoiled about not having to clean our produce.
Yeah, I admit it. I buy triple washed spinach.
Yeah. Just the
'Cause
general
even if I do it, I'm still getting grit all up in the spinach. It's just like I'm not good at it.
No. Physics police says E. coli comes from improper growing conditions. I mean, that's a good catch-all for it. It doesn't. What are those improper conditions that allow the E. coli to run? I don't know.
Yeah.
Did you guys see the super worm moon?
No.
What? Nope.
The full moon this last weekend was a super worm moon.
I didn't know it was called a super worm moon. I did notice that it was big and full and was keeping me awake. And I tried to pull the shades down so that I could sleep.
So I learned that each of the full moons has a name according to the Farmer's Almanac. And so this one was a worm moon because it's the one in spring, at the turn of spring, when all the worms start coming out of the soil because they've like defrosted.
Interesting.
So it's called a super worm moon.
Worm. I like that. I've never heard of the worm moon, but that's great.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. And the super worm moon helped move the Suez Canal situation. It's not fully out from what I hear, but it has moved.
It has
As long as
moved.
it's not sideways.
It's not sideways. Yeah.
Yes.
I think they've cleared it enough that the traffic is starting to flow again, right?
Starting, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yes, so it's called a super moon because it's nice and big and the pull on the tides is extra heavy, right? So that was the thing about Suez Canal. Is it raise the tide?
Oh,
Really
which is
high.
they needed a super high tide.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, fantastic! I get that. Yeah,
So
that
after
makes sense.
all of the man-made interventions they tried, in the end, the tide is what helped them get that boat out of the canal.
That ship in that canal, you could see it from space.
Yeah. So if you
It's
want
so
to
big.
put that giant ship through a tiny space like that, like maybe the trade-off you're making is you're moving more stuff, but it's going to take 2 weeks longer and you have to go around the Horn. Maybe you can't go through the canal. Or send it on a smaller boat.
All of the ships are that big now. Though
But when they
not
made
just
the canal,
that
they
one.
weren't that big.
make the canal bigger.
I think what they need to do is just look at the weather report. One thing you can always tell out here in the Central Valley, it's going to be a gorgeous windless day. When you look up and you can see out over some of the ag land, you see the hot air balloons are up. Then you know there's not going to be wind today. It's going to be a nice windless day. Nothing crazy going on. That's what apparently did it. It was high winds.
Yeah, it was
the
high
boat
winds,
just got
but they
turned
decided
by wind.
Yeah.
Let's look at the weather forecast. Big windy day. Maybe chill out for take a couple days off for the big.
And
ship.
I don't know because like in the San Francisco Bay they have bar pilots, right? And like the wind in the bay
Sounds like a bad combination.
is insane. The wind is just it can be crazy. But these people jump from a little tugboat onto a ladder on these giant container ships and pilot these giant container ships through a space that is not that much bigger. Maybe has a few, I'm exaggerating, but it's like a few feet of room on either side. It's not huge. These little channels that are in the bay for these
Yeah.
giant container ships, because the average depth of the bay is like 10 feet or something. So like,
Except for the channel, right?
Right.
They
The
have to
channel's
come
like
in
100
through the
feet.
channel, but those ships are not coming in at low tide. Like a lot of them will
Right.
actually stay outside of the bay, and they'll like take their time coming in so they can time it to come in during a higher tide, so that they're not going to have as much of an issue.
But like, do they have canal pilots? That's my question. Is like, are people just steering as best they can? And is that why this happened? If they had canal pilots who like their entire job was to steer this ship through the eye of a needle.
I think it's just the ship captains. I think the ship captains take them through. Like there was somebody who was like a ship captain from another ship who was complaining about that ship for being like rude and like basically like passing them in a like, and was like, this guy was going too fast anyway, and then he got in there and he couldn't handle the wind, and there was some funny conversation on Twitter. I was like, wow, ship captains bad mouthing each other on Twitter.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, it seems like that works pretty well in a lot of places. They have harbor pilots and bar pilots. Like maybe there should be a canal pilot. Just saying.
But at a certain point, I mean, if it's that windy and the wind is coming at a certain angle that could push the rear of the boat one way or the other, like if you're so big and heavy, if it gets just a little bit too far, you're not going to be able to come back from that. And that's what happened.
Yeah, that's the scary thing about those big ships is like by the time you realize you've made a mistake, it's too late. There's literally nothing you can do.
But okay, but here's the
in
other
slow motion. You know that happened in slow motion.
Here's the thing though. How many ships are going through there? 10% of all the trade that's going overseas or something passes through that canal. How many times has this happened? One we've ever heard of?
That we've ever heard of.
So whatever it is, it can't be that big a deal. I think what it must come down to is that there's the wind, there's the speed, there's the how heavy or how big it is. Somebody screwed up.
Yeah. Okay.
just
Yeah,
admit
somebody
could have
screwed
been an
up.
operator error. It could have been pushing forward when they should have waited or whatever. But yes, you're right. Somebody screwed up.
If that many other ships have managed to get through all the time and never wedged themselves in there, it's not a canal design issue. Stop blaming the weather. There's been all the weathers and there've been ships going through there.
It's been fine.
It's been fine. Somebody screwed up.
No, nobody screwed up. They just wanted to create a situation for the best memeable photographs. Ever. Ooh. Eric in Alaska just shared a marketplace about a Columbia River bar pilot in our chat. But then also asked, did you see the story about the Anchorage Costco where the ravens are raiding people's shopping carts?
Smart boys and girls all.
The ravens are like, give me your food.
Wait, where is this?
Anchorage, Alaska, ravens
Right.
are stealing people's... I mean, Costco, you've got those big unwieldy shopping carts in the parking lot, and it's the crazy parking lot, and you probably got your 6 kids in tow on your way to your minivan, and you're just like, and then the raven comes in.
It's also because you're holding the drink that you got at the little
And the hot
pizza
dog,
stand.
right? Yeah.
But I don't know if anybody else has this. The lids that they give you at the Costco don't actually stay on the top of the cup. And so you're trying to balance this thing in the shopping cart because you got it and you should have just eaten there, but it was so busy. I'm going home. And then it starts to, it's falling over. It's not going to make it. Wow!
TN.
Amazing.
Thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much.
Wow.
Gigantic shout out. We need what is that thing called? A shofar? What the... one of those kind of sounds. We need a sound effects crew for this
Wow.
thing. TN with the 500. Wow, that's going to go a long way. That's
Thank
going to
you.
take this show on the road. That's like that's getting us part way to one of those road trips where we get to go out and visit people in the country. Yeah.
Where
Thank you so
should
much.
we do our
Someday.
first live show? And we're
Really want my
around?
RV to work someday.
Yeah.
Is the plan.
It's Russian currency. Okay, whatever.
Russian
That's fine.
currency? No.
Whatever. It still works. I don't know what the army. Guarv's trying to figure it out. Oh, it's real. Somebody's saying, is it Brazilian or just real?
Real.
R5.
Real. Thank you. We can talk about things.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Talk about Costco Ravens. I mean, they know how the supersize packages work.
There's a lot of packaging in Costco stuff, though. So how do they get through it all? Sometimes it's like a bag in a bag in a box.
No. That's the thing about Costco is they don't bag anything.
No.
They give you these
I know
boxes
they don't,
to
but-
stack everything. So they're just swooping down and taking. Yeah, you're right. It's like a 20-pound bag of almonds. So yeah, these must be some
No,
pretty
that's what
big
I'm
ravens.
saying. Like, for example, like cheese is
It's all
like
bulk.
it's 10 bags of cheese in a bag in a box.
It's true.
Yeah, so I don't know. I bought Laughing Cow, like the creamy Swiss there recently, and it's 3 individual wheels inside of a box, and inside each wheel are the foil wrapped pieces of cheese. I was like, this is too much. You outdone yourself today.
It's really intense. Wait, what? Ravens can open doors? Eric. They're not that big. No. No, I do not want to subscribe to the Anchorage Daily News, but you're not going to let me in. No.
Okay, nobody do the math on Tian's donation. I think it's fine to put it in a currency that makes the number look the biggest. I'm all for that.
It's
much more exciting.
It's amazing. We gotta.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, wow, sure. We like the same cheese. Oh, yeah.
I was
Tillamook
just
is
in
my favorite,
Tillamook.
too.
Oh my
That's
gosh. Okay.
favorite cheese.
Y'all.
And, I still like the Humboldt butter. Humboldt.
Okay,
Creamery?
you guys. So in Tillamook, they have the Tillamook Creamery, and they also have a Tillamook Crematorium.
Please explain more.
This is too close. I'm sorry. I came for a tour of your cheese making facilities. I think I'm in the wrong place.
Yikes.
Yeah. But
Yana won't touch the pre-shredded cheese because she won't explain it exactly, but she knows to me. But she knows, or maybe she's tried to explain it to me, and I just didn't understand. But she knows how it's made to stay looking fresh.
it's in a
Post
giant.
shredded. No, there's more.
There's chemicals involved.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's a
of course
lot
there
of preservative
are.
to make the shredded cheese look fresh. So, yeah, I'm off shredded cheese forever.
That's interesting.
You can shred your own cheese. It doesn't take that long.
You just gotta get one of those gloves that prevents you from, cutting yourself.
Oh yeah. It's all
we
you just gotta eat that last little nub. Just
can't-
eat it.
No, you gotta get the gloves so then you can get aggressive with it because it's annoying to be like, I don't want to die from shredding cheese. I'll eat the chemicals. Just get the glove and then you can do that with impunity. You can't even. It's just.
I went to the Tillamook Creamery on Monday.
Sorry.
On Monday, I went to the creamery, and Kai wanted ice cream, and they sell ice cream. And luckily, they have like an outdoor little ice cream booth, so it was outdoor, totally fine. But there was a line of people, many of them not wearing masks, to get indoors to their gift shop and the tour. And we had at first thought, hey, that could be fun to go tour the creamery facility. And then we saw all that. And we went, oh, no. No.
Yeah, no, that
So we just got out.
Today, huh?
We got ice cream, and then we went and we sat in our car and we ate it.
This week in science is sad to announce the passing of Kirsten Sanford. It started when she tried to get ice cream in a line of people who weren't wearing masks, and basically that's the whole story.
That's the whole story.
Yeah, not worth it. Not worth it. There's so much else that can with the rest of the not worth it.
Yeah. I was like, wow. There were a lot of people wearing masks, but many who were not, and it was just it's like, interesting.
So me and my littlest went to the zoo this weekend.
Nice zoo.
There were, for the most part, it's limited. You have to buy tickets online. They have limited people going into the zoo, all the whole thing, wear masks. I saw about a half a dozen adults who were just wandering around without the mask once they were inside. And I wanted to kick them all out. But I was like, I'm not the person who should confront people in these situations because I'm too aggressive, verbally.
Yeah.
But they have a new exhibit. What is it called? Octopi? What is it called? It's like half.
They have a
giraffe.
copy?
They're having a copy. They have two. It is the first time I had ever seen one in person.
Oh, they're great.
They have two of them. It's the back end of a zebra, the head of a giraffe that's kind of like a deer meets, and then the body of a moose. So I have seen pictures of a copy. Copy?
Okapi.
Okapi.
And we saw Okapi in Baltimore, Justin.
Okay. I don't remember. I think I missed them.
We saw them at the Maryland Zoo.
I think I missed it because Okapi, in my mind, is like a small deer. I've seen the pictures a million times, and I don't know what reference point I ever had for it, but I've always pictured them like being the size of a small deer, like very, very kind of smallish, foresty type creature, savanna-ish creature, whatever they are. This thing is like big as a moose. They're huge.
They are giraffes without the long neck.
They're closely related to giraffe. They got the little giraffe. What are they called? Antenna?
Ossicones.
How many?
Ossicones.
Ossicones. They got the little ossicones. The giraffe antenna.
They're bony.
They got the long purple tongue thing. Right? Mm-hmm. And then they've also got the prehensile lippity stuff. And then, they have like full-on zebra stripes on the rear cords, which I've seen the pictures, but I had they were 5-6 times bigger than I had had them place held in my head.
They're on my short list of favorite animals for sure. They are essentially rainforest giraffes.
Rainforest. Oh yeah, that's right. It did tell us that they were rainforest creatures. That's right.
So they have the shorter neck and they have the striped rear to kind of help with camouflage in a thick forest because you have like the strands of light coming through, right? But they're wild. I love them. They're critically endangered.
I've just gotten an update.
Animals.
I've just gotten an update. It's this is specifically the shredded cheese to avoid is the Parmesan cheese that's already pre-shredded, and it's for it not to clump up again. Is why they do it.
Hi, Yenna.
Hi, Yenna.
Somebody's watching.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Huh. Okapis are great. I didn't know the Saxu got those.
Got two. Except they're not together because apparently they're very antisocial creatures.
They're solitary for sure, but also they probably are. I could imagine they may be awaiting a breeding recommendation to put them together. If there's a male and a female.
Who? I was reading about ravens in Costco parking lots.
Oh,
Yo copies.
And then there was this really terrifying moment where I looked into this cage that normally held these little wolf monkey gibbon things. I don't know what they are. These tiny little cute wolf monkeys. I don't know what they are. Little monkeys, cute. They run around. There's a whole family that lives in this one enclosure.
Monkeys. Okay.
Well, that's what they're. I don't remember the name. Wolf gibbon? Is that a thing?
No.
Google wolf
What we
monkey.
should do, we'll just be like, and Justin gives a tour through the zoo,
Are you talking about a wolf?
making up
Mona
names
monkey?
of animals.
Could be a
Oh,
wolf's
a
monkey.
genin. That's why you're getting confused.
I'm
A
saying
genin.
gibbon. I'm saying gibbon. Ginnin.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So it's a
Genin.
real thing. Hello, everybody. Justin's tour is actually more accurate than he thought it was. It's just close. It's close. It's close to the right answers. Anyway, I looked into this exhibit, and there's this giant eagle thing in there. And I'm like, oh my God, an eagle got in and ate all the wolf ginnin. It ate all the little monkeys. Apparently, the ginnins are just on vacation, and while they're away, the eagles get.
I don't think they're gonna let an eagle in to eat all the babies.
Also,
I know, but-
primates are animals that are often put into exhibits with other species because primates are pretty good at defending their space. So I would also
this
guess
eagle was
that,
big, talony.
but I feel like an eagle might not go for a monkey with giant also canines.
These are tiny monkeys.
With
These aren't
venomous
that big.
canines.
Maybe. I don't know. All right, let's not try.
Here, look at the Gennins.
But they weren't in there together. They
They
weren't
look
in
like
there.
they need venom.
I like how Google's like, did you mean wolf spider?
No, yeah,
No.
Oh.
That's not what I meant.
I got the
Thank
wolf and the
you.
monkey part right. I just
Oh,
had gibbon instead of gibbon.
Did you guys hear about the
Guinea.
Nemo jumping spider?
No? What?
Yes, named this week.
Oh, cute.
Oh, because of the
Look at his like
coloration.
Nemo dude. Yeah. Look at his
I
stripes.
love
He's
jumping
so cute.
spiders.
Which is pretty
a gift.
funny considering you don't like spiders generally.
Right, but I love jumping spiders.
Because they have so much personality.
They really do.
Would it be
Just always-
spider-nality?
Look at him. I'm having
Look at
a fun
him
time.
waving.
Woo, 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 woo. I love them. Meritus Nemo.
He's pretty cute.
Fun fact about
Pretty cute
clownfish:
spider.
if the matriarch, the head female, disappears, the lead male will turn into a female.
A female. Yeah.
Which would
Yeah,
have
we
been a
talked
very
about that on the show.
it would have been a very different story if they
It
followed
would have been.
nature.
Yes, Marlon should have turned into a female.
Yeah, and then
But it's
I have a
Who
mother
made that?
again.
You know, somebody made that decision at some point. You know, there was somebody like, well, you know about these fish. This is what happens. And somebody was like, yeah, no, we're not going to
Yeah,
go
we've
there.
already
Also,
got a lot of
clownfish
special
aren't
art.
monogamous, so that's the other thing. There would have been several. So
Oh.
Marlin wouldn't have been the only deadie in the area.
And Disney, could you just please stop killing off all the parents? You're putting ideas in the heads of the kids. It's all-
So there is an interesting interview between Pete Davidson and Glenn Close.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, and in it she talks about playing Cruella de Vil, and she has this moment of talking about how when she was little she used to watch Disney movies all the time, and along the way realized that for the story to happen, that what happens is the child has to have something bad happen to them and then be saved, in order to have something good. So that's how their story arc has to happen. And nothing bad can happen to the child as long as the mother is there. And so all the Disney movies they get rid of the mom in one way or another.
Bambi.
There's right. But the dad
Snow
might
White.
be in the picture somewhere, but he's like not there really. He's not paying attention, or he had to go away for some
Cinderella?
reason. Bambi, the dad is off somewhere doing something else,
He's being the king of the forest. It's an important job.
Yeah. Yeah. So it
I
was an
think
interesting.
the dad is still there in Snow White. He just was like he's not in the picture. He's off doing something.
No, Snow White,
whatever.
the dad died.
Did he die? Because because it's the stepmother.
It's part of the monologue. Is
Okay.
Yeah, the
Because
dad
I know the mother
remarried.
died and he remarried, but then he also dies. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, he dies later. Yeah,
But then there's at some point
but the
also
mother
where
gets
they
replaced with an evil stepmother who can also be a witch. You know, so there's like these like the evil. So yeah, it's just really interesting the way that the stories put together.
Sarah Silverman's character in Wreck-It Ralph. At some point, the turning point is when they stare at important water. The princess has to look. Somebody has to look at important water, and then, for some, it's looking into a well. For some, it's a fountain. For some, it's a still pond. There's a weird thing where all the princesses have their sort of transitional moment that usually turns into song after staring into like a reflection or bubbles underwater if you're already underwater like Ariel. They have some sort of weird water moment that then becomes the transformative moment to inspire them onward.
I stared into important water and my life has never been the same since.
Yeah.
Yeah, Thunder Beaver and heavy metal bands and fans are the ones who get blamed for the whole kill your parents thing, right? Disney. Seriously.
Mulan, the whole thing centers around a reflection song. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's Snow White has the looking into a well or something. Yeah.
I'm wishing for the one I love. Yep.
Identity 4. You have to wake up at 5. That's early.
Oh.
Oh, it is after 11. Yeah, Identity. How is it after 11 already? Noodle says, keep it going. Eric, this quote is so good. Strange women lying in ponds distributing swords is no basis for a system of government. Hello, Monty Python.
But if that's not, then what is? Because really, I feel like that might be an improvement some days.
I watched. They have a
good.
they have a documentary on Netflix now, a 6-part documentary on the history of Monty Python.
Oh, really?
It's really good.
I
I watched
that.
it all in one day.
Wait a second.
sounds
Wait
great.
a second. Where is this? What is this?
Netflix.
Okay, I've seen this then, but I don't know which one I've seen because
This
I
one's
think-
new. It came
'cause-
out
okay,
like a couple weeks ago or a month ago, maybe. I don't know.
Okay, so then it's old because I've seen one since.
Okay.
I've seen it. It's
No,
all-
no.
It was
No,
called
I swear
Almost
to
the
you,
Truth. It was called
Monty
Almost the
Python
Truth, the Lawyer's
must
Cut.
have more documentaries about a 3-year show and some movies that came after. But they have more. There are more Monty Python documentaries than there are works by Monty Python at this point. It's really fascinating.
Hey, listen, if they can keep riding that train, I don't blame them.
And each
Also,
time they're like, this is the last time we're going to tell these old stories, so I'll just tell you the stories that maybe you've heard a dozen times before, because we're kind of running out of stories at this point. But they always have more and more great... I would love to watch actually all of the Monty Python documentaries in order to watch them age over the course of 3 days.
What I have noticed from these documentaries is that as time goes on, they are more brutally honest about one another. Ooh. So in this one, they clearly they no longer cared about being nice, and they just told the pretty unpolished truth about each other and about their relationships throughout the thing, which was very interesting. And like, you could tell there was no hard feelings at all. They were just like, we're too old to like pretend that we were happy with one another about this one thing.
Yeah.
And so it's like they talked, it wasn't like angry, there wasn't like vitriol behind it, but it definitely was very matter of fact of like John Cleese talking about like how he and Terry Jones did not like each other and constantly
fun fact,
fought.
By the way, a lot of people found it humorous, but it really hurts to get hit in the face with a fish. It is not comfortable. I did not like that scene. I know it's popular amongst the fans, but it really hurts to get, it stings. They have scales and it stings to get hit in the face with a fish. Like, stop it. No, at some point they're just making
your
stuff
pain
up.
is making me laugh, sir.
Like, I've got no more stories, but if you dig deep and come up with something, we can give you another paycheck for sitting down and babbling semi-coherently into a camera for half an hour. All right, let's give it a go.
So I've read several biographies and stuff about
You might
them.
be right, Gaurav.
And
No way.
there's definitely, like, John Cleese is someone who I think has never sugarcoated things too much.
No.
No, he's always been a little bit crass. Yes.
Yes, but other people have. And I think that it was really interesting this time to say, like, Terry Jones and John Cleese didn't really like each other. And actually the fact that they would debate about the status of sketches and things like that, they were kind of the opposing sides. And then the rest of the team would kind of make the decisions and break the tie on a lot of things. And so when John Cleese left, there was this weird power vacuum, which was like, that kind of stuff is pretty interesting. But yeah, just hearing both of them kind of talk about that.
Do you guys want to start do you want to scrap this whole science thing and do like a sketch comedy show? Because I would really like that. I think that would be a lot of fun. Can we do that?
That would be a lot of fun.
I think we've done enough. I mean, I feel like we've
Isn't that
gone
what
far
our
enough
after
with
show
this
is?
genre. I think we should just start doing a sketch comedy show. We should put together a troupe, and tour the country doing like live sketch comedy. We need a juggler also. Actually, we need a juggling monkey. Can you train a monkey to juggle, Blair?
No, we just need to get one of those rabbits.
Now Blair's amazing hand-walking rabbits. How does she train them? How do they do it, folks? Ladies and gentlemen, dispel all disbelief as you watch the wonder of the hand-walking rabbits. What was this? Guav. TWIS episode 1000 is going to be the hosts yelling swear words at each other. You guys missed the pre-show. We haven't started airing that yet.
For something completely different.
We slightly talk about what's coming on the show, and then it's like, oh, more Neanderthals? Great. Oh yeah, no, that's what we talked about, isn't it? In the last meeting, we need another Neanderthal story, Justin. That's what we talked about, isn't it? Well, no, but this one was just particularly interesting because it has like, something about Neanderthals. Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, Blair, what do you got? I don't want to say. Come on, Blair. What do you have? I have invertebrate sex and a jumping spider story. Oh my God. Oh, haven't we worn out that? Is there anybody who's missing another one of those stories? Okay, fine. Okay, save us, Kiki. What have you got? Something complicated about a pathway in the brain? Okay, it's going to be one of those nights, isn't it? All right, well, let's just get through this one. Let's do a tight 90 and be out, and then we'll call it next week. We'll come up with something we haven't done before. That's pretty much how every pre-show goes.
Oh, my God. Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
That's funny, Justin. That's talking about maybe that we have a pre-show and we don't that's all end up joke. In one room.
That's okay. I told them one joke. You two have another joke that you got to hear. Was the idea that we ever talk about the show before we do the show? I mean, we have the show notes. We have a set thing that we have to bring, but we don't vet each other or storyboard or sound or do any of that stuff.
Nope.
I once in a while I try to, like, if I can get there early enough, if you guys have stories or if we have a guest and it's all there early enough, I might try to, like, tailor the disclaimer a little bit to the show or the guest. If it's all showing up last minute, I might even still try to do that, but for the most part that becomes its own isolated thing that could happen. I should just take like a week off and just write like the next 52 disclaimers. And then
But you wouldn't.
No.
You
Well,
would
then
not.
also they're not as topical.
No, they have to be slightly. Every once in a while, they're topic. They get a little
Wouldn't
topical.
be.
You should do more shows
Are
drunk.
you gonna disclaimer Beavers next week?
Yeah, totally.
Did you see the meme of about the Suez Canal and beavers?
No.
Okay.
Frumpy B says we should do more shows. Huh, interesting.
We should just do more shows.
Apparently.
Drunk on water and high on life. Woohoo! Tight 90. Oh my gosh. Yeah, we should absolutely. I mean, if we keep doing what we're doing for the next 40 minutes, we can do an April Fool's Day show.
Yeah.
We all do need to get some sleep. You're right. It would be
How come
good.
I can't find it?
Blair is trying to find a joke that she meant to tell 5 minutes ago, and is still struggling to find the material.
I can't find it. It was
That's
just
all right.
basically.
We'll fix it in post.
It's a picture. It's a picture of the Ever Given in the Suez Canal, and then it shows Jeff Goldblum, and it says Beavers. It says, "You crazy son of a bitch, you did it." I love it. It's good. That's all. That's all. Just the beavers got excited because the Ever Given is like a dam.
I have material. I have material already for the sketch comedy show. Physics, please. I'm ready to rock. I've got at least one episode locked and loaded, ready to go.
I'm a little afraid.
Yeah, you should be. It's good. It's good stuff. It'll make you laugh, but you can't bring your whole family to see it.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
I made that one.
Oh boy.
That was one I memed. I made a meme.
That's hilarious. Oh, jeez.
Oh, it's sad.
Jeez. Sad because it's true.
It's already April 1st somewhere. Oh, jeez.
Okay, well, before it's April 1st here, anybody hear about the congressperson when the House voted 118 to 1, and the Senate was completely unanimous in favor of passing a strict sex trafficking law? That one person who voted against was a congressperson who's now under investigation for sex trafficking?
What?
Can't write that! That just happened! That just happened! The one congressperson who voted against the sex trafficking bill is being investigated for sex trafficking, which I'm just now assuming that's what started the investigation.
Identity Force says I need to end the show now. I think he's...
Okay. Say goodnight. Say goodnight, Identity 4.
Good night.
Say goodnight, Blair.
Good night, Blair. Say good night, Justin.
Good night, Justin.
Good night,
Dr. Kiki.
Good night, everyone. We won't be back.
Representing
April
his
Fools
constituents.
will be back next week to talk about beavers. I hope you join us because it's going to be sciencey and awesome. Have a wonderful week. Stay safe. Stay well.